Welcome to the Thor Hour. I'm your host, John Thorhauer. Join me in conversations as I learn from experts, enthusiasts, artisans, and other folks as we consider the human experience. Grab an episode or two and explore the talents, passions, and curiosities from Frederick, Maryland, and beyond. If you enjoy these conversations and want to help me out, please like, subscribe, and share with your friends. Today, I am talking with Anna Filipovic Windsor, who was born in Croatia as a refugee in the 1990s. She grew up in the post-war country of Bosnia, Herzegovina. Anna recently was honored to become an American citizen. Join us in a conversation as Anna shares her story, a story of a war refugee who returned home to a war-torn country, eventually immigrating to the United States, most recently becoming an American citizen. I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Anna Filipovic Windsor. Well, Anna, it is really great to have you here, and super excited about the interview. And so let's just dive into things. So, you are from what's the town that you're actually from? What's the name of it?
So it's called Prozor Rama.
All right. Yeah. I was asking you to pronounce that.
Yes. It's a really small town in Bosnia and Herzegovina.
Okay.
So I understand. It's even more interesting when I tell you like my little village or the neighborhood. It's kind of like a cluster of neighborhoods. It's pronounced Sheet.
Okay.
So
Sheet.
Yes, great.
Yeah. Well, you spelled it for me, but I wasn't sure how to say it. So you saying it and spelling it.
Yeah. I was like trying to figure out how would he pronounce it. So
I
typed it. I put it in, and I asked my husband. I was like, "Hey, how would you pronounce this as an American?" And he was like, "Sheet."
Yeah.
I was like, "Yes, you got it."
Yeah. And I've known you for a while, but I didn't know your background. And the story which we're gonna be able to go through today, and that you're gonna share with us. And then I saw your posting. I think it was back in March on Instagram of you becoming a naturalized U.S. citizen.
Yes,
which is super exciting. I was excited. I'm sure you're very excited about that.
Yeah.
And that kind of spurred the conversation here and brought us to today. So why don't you tell us a little bit about what was the state of your country and when you were born?
Yeah, so I was born in 1992.
Okay. And
I was born as a refugee. My parents are from Bosnia and Herzegovina, from the little town we just talked about. They met there. They were from neighborhoods, or we call them villages because it's a cluster of really villages. And so they just were married for about 2 years. They had already a 2-year-old daughter, my older sister. And my mom just found out that she was pregnant again. And that's when my dad got the drafting letter that he was one of the first people in my village to be drafted to go to war.
Oh, really?
And wow. So my mom waited till the absolutely very last bus. She often describes that they were packing, and they were just like, they couldn't speak to each other because like the tears were literally stuck in the throat, and they just like were barely getting through it because they didn't know if this was a temporary goodbye, if they're going to ever see each other again. Wow. Like it was just, horrendous. And, this is a really newlywed marriage, like they're newlyweds, right, basically. Like my husband and I are now like in our late 20s. That's what they were. I couldn't imagine me now having to pack and telling him, okay, so I might never see you again.
Right.
We just started our life together. So so we got on the bus, and it was me, my mom's belly, my mom, obviously, and my little sister. And so we got on the bus, and thankfully we had family in Croatia, where we didn't have to stay at a refugee camp, because a lot of people in my generation, actually, they went to Croatia to give birth, but they came back immediately because refugee camps are not a great place to stay for a really long time.
Yeah, I imagine.
Yeah, so people who stay there, they stay there because they absolutely have to stay there. So my mom we were in this really bad time. We were actually lucky that we had someone from family that we can go to in a safe space. And so we ended up going to this pretty big city in Croatia. It's called Rijeka. It means river. That's in like the northeast. Northwest area of Croatia. Yeah, and it's in this little like peninsula area called Istria. And so we went there, and it was my mom's sister, my aunt. They took us in. They just helped with everything. They were so wonderful, and still today, just wonderful support, wonderful family. So that's where I was born, and I was born as a refugee. We were there for about 3 years. My dad wasn't present at my birth. He wasn't able to leave his position, but he was there for my christening. And then after 3 years, we moved back to our hometown in Bosnia and Herzegovina, which is where I was raised and where I grew up.
Okay. Wow. So, yeah, obviously you were young enough that I assume you don't have memories of the time during war itself.
No memories of the war.
Yeah. But I'm sure your parents, I'm sure there are things that are just crystallized in their mind from that time. Can't imagine being in that situation like you just described, having to leave your spouse and your child and in that situation, even, right, with a war, like there's a lot of things you just don't know what's going to happen there. So did your mom, she ever talk about that, or your dad, they ever talk about what that was like? Or?
Yeah, they do talk about it, but they don't really talk about it in like a sequence or a timeline.
Yeah.
It's like a story here and there. Or my dad usually talks about the war when we are on our way to Mostar, which is another big city, which is a much bigger city in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and his work was really connected to going often to that place. And then I ended up going to a boarding school there, and also my younger sister. So whenever we would ride down there, it's about an hour and a half, 2 hour drive. And whenever we would ride there, my dad would mention, up on that mountain, this is where we were fighting, or this is where we're stationed. And, here is where it was the line between between us and the enemy and things like that. So it was kind of like as he was getting flashbacks as we would be, driving around and stuff. My mom does often talk about living as a refugee. One story that she particularly has spoken to me often about is, so we went to a really multi-ethnic town. This place there were a lot of different people in the town, and to explain a little bit the composition of that area. So in Bosnia and Herzegovina, you've got 3 different nations and ethnicities, and they are the Bosniaks, who tend to be Muslim. They are Croatians, who tend to be Catholic, and then you've got Serbs or Serbians, who tend to be Orthodox, Christian Orthodox. And those were the main divisions, and that's who the war was in between these 3 nations and divisions,
right.
In between these 3 ethnicities. So when we were in Rijeka, my mom went to get ultrasounds. She went to the hospital and get all these things. She happened to have Serbian nurses with her, and Serbian nurses were working in that hospital. Again, it was no one expected the war to happen. No one thought this was going to happen. So, you got people, Serbians who lived in the majority Croatian area. You got Croatians who lived in the majority Serbian area, and Bosniaks, all over the place. So I just remember my mom telling me that she was getting an ultrasound, and the nurses are just asking her questions and all these other things. And because at the time we were enemies because it was a wartime, they told her, because your husband is up on the front and he is fighting and he's in the war, you are already going to be a single mom with your daughter. Like, you don't want to add another kid to this. You should abort this kid.
Oh, wow.
So imagine telling a woman who just is going through the most traumatic time of her life, she has a healthy baby in her that's growing. There's nothing wrong with that baby. Right. But just because there's a potential that her husband might die, and probably because we were enemies at the time, the nurses thought that it was fine to tell her, hey, you should just abort this healthy baby. That's not what they should do based on their profession.
Yeah. What did she say to them?
Yeah, that's not, You should work your best to save them. And, there's always resources, and you can, it's just, but thankfully my mom had a really good support system. Yeah. And my mom told her, why would I abort a healthy baby? That just doesn't make sense to me. And if God forbid my husband dies in the war, I'm gonna have another piece of him that's left with me, and I'm gonna have 2 blessings from him instead of just one, you know.
Right.
Yeah, so it's like, so she just saw it kind of, and my mom is very strong in her faith, and she just didn't understand why this would happen, and she understood, you know, she didn't think this person was inherently evil or anything.
Right.
It was a wartime,
Yeah.
and you know, so it was just kind of sad. So that's kind of a story she often talks about, and I think another thing that's really important to mention, and you know, this is my family's story. There's so many stories like this,
Right.
and there's some that are 10 times worse, of people that have gone just through absolutely horrible like things that they're still dealing with, and traumas that they still are trying to like resolve. But one thing that I want to say, you know, my parents were just beginning their lives. You know, they just like started renovating a house, and they, you know, I think my mom and dad were opening a store, or like we're gonna open a grocery store or something. My dad was gonna get this amazing job. Like, you know, they were just building their lives.
Right. Starting out.
And then the war happened.
Yeah.
And then it pushed back the country.
Sure.
Many decades back.
Yeah.
Like the country is still recovering. The war ended in 1995.
Wow.
It's 2022 now, and they're still recovering to this day.
Well, I'm going to bring up a map, because you already talked about a few things that I think a map will kind of illustrate a little bit, and that is, you know, all these colored regions are regions that at one point made up, for a period of time, one country, Yugoslavia, right? But each one of these regions represents a separate ethnic group, and as I go through this, you know, correct me if I get anything wrong here. But so within here, I think I count like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 different groups. And so you lived in the area represented here with the green, right? Bosnia and Herzegovina, and you had to move to Croatia, the yellow area, right? And Sarajevo is not real far, like on this map, right, from where you were born or where you lived.
Yeah,
not where you were born.
Sarai was about 2.5 hours driving from my hometown.
Yeah. Okay. And so one of the things as I read about this, I came to understand was, you know, you have this map and you have these kind of colored sections. And so you have Croatia, you have Serbia. But within each of these areas, the primary group is Croatian or Serbian. But even within those areas, you'd have significant pockets of the other ethnic group, right? And so it got very complicated, I imagine, very quickly. And some of those interactions, like what you're talking about with your mom at the hospital, like there's just a mix of people in all these different places, and all of a sudden those people are at war with one another. That has to be really confusing. I can't imagine, going to a hospital and having that conversation with people, and the whole conversation being clouded by, well, is that because we're at war, or is that because you think this is really good for me?
Yeah.
And that's one conversation, right? And so this had to have these ripple effects that happened all the time.
Oh, yeah. And it's, I mean, it used to be Yugoslavia, right? It was a communist country, and people called themselves Yugoslavians, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know, it was communism, so it wasn't a perfect country by any means.
Right.
But I do remember, you know, people were telling me that it's just, you know, there wasn't arguments per se like they are here today. You know, these discussions about ethnicity and stuff, everyone just lived their lives. But it's just interesting to me that I've met multiple people who were, you know, had maybe their dad was Serbian and their mom was Croatian, and they were Yugoslavian. That's what they know. Their like birth certificate says Yugoslavian.
Okay.
And now they're like, I am a part of a country that no longer exists, and they had like a crisis. So like identity crisis, like who am I? If Yugoslavia doesn't exist anymore, am I now a Serbian? Am I now a Croatian? Like how do I identify myself? So that was like a big deal what happened.
Sure.
And the war was, you know, so we had a leader in and I'm saying we, but, you know, I didn't live during Yugoslavia, so I'm definitely not an expert on these topics. I'm not a historian. I am myself researching a lot of these things now as like an adult, trying to understand more my upbringing, trying to understand my roots, my family. And I just want to say that area there has huge history. Like, it's not just this war. Like, that area was under the Ottoman Empire, under Roman Empire, under Austro-Hungarian ruling.
Yeah, as I went to read about it, and try to learn a little bit.
Yeah.
My notes, and it went back further, but I was like, okay, let me scratch a few things out so I understand something like 13th century is where we're going back to, and you can go back further to understand the Croatians, like you just mentioned, are Catholic. The Serbs, this is primarily, right, Orthodox Christian, and the Bosnians are Muslim. And there's major clashes back in the 13th century going on between these groups.
Yeah, like that's the thing that a lot of times when you live in the Western world, it's all like peace and love, and love. But you really have to understand the history of it. And you have to understand the hurt and pain that people are in. Like I can't be mad on people who are enemies in the war because I know they were also defending who they thought they should be defending, and who defended their land who they thought they should be defending, you know. And as a Croatian, I'm sure I'm biased in certain things. You know, I was raised as a Croatian, consumed Croatian media, went to Croatian schools. Like this is all. That's why I'm saying, like, I'm still trying to figure everything out too, as someone who grew up in a post-war country. And there's like many people who I know who remember the war, and like even my sister, she was only 2, 3, 4 at the time, as the war progressed, but she remembers certain things. And it's just kind of interesting, like to think about it. And so when Tito, the leader of Yugoslavia, died, when he died, there was just a ruckus of what's going to happen. So he was a
very strong force that was able to hold, like you look at these groups, he was able to hold that country together in a lot of ways.
Correct.
And there were problems, obviously, with him, but that was a benefit, right, to be able to kind of hold everything together.
Yes.
And when he died, that force was gone.
Yes.
Right?
And by my understanding, there wasn't really a leader that could do that again, that could unite and keep Yugoslavia going. And so in all that drama, what was going on.
And on top of that, like when he died, there were major economic problems. It was like right after, I think, the big oil crisis of the 70s, and that impacted the economy there. And so the economy is terrible. People are probably not getting the jobs they want or can't get any jobs. The leader dies. And now, as we can see, when you go through difficult economic times, it's easy to start looking around and start thinking, well, is it this person's fault? Whose fault is it, right? You want to find somebody. And so there's tensions there that go back centuries that are going to be easy to kind of boil over, really.
Bring it up. And then what happens in this, like this didn't only happen in the Balkans there. Like this happens in every country. You go look for people who you have similarities with. So you can group and you can, get together and try to figure something out. Like you're trying to find where do you belong, right? And you might even know more of the history than I know of that area with like the crisis and all that stuff. But I do know that after Tito died, there just wasn't a leader that showed up that wanted to lead this. And in the meantime, Slovenia and Croatia were like, hey, while this is all going on, we want independence. So they declared their independence. And then shortly after, Bosnia and Herzegovina declared their independence. But the issue with Bosnia and Herzegovina is it's so diverse. So, Serbians who live in Bosnia and Herzegovina, they wanted to be part of Serbia. Croatians who live, and still today, they want to be part of Serbia. Croatians who live in Bosnia and Herzegovina want to be part of Croatia, and still to this day, they consider that they're part of Croatia. And I believe, and I might be incorrect about this, but when you were doing like census, like to get the information on citizens and stuff, there wasn't even an option to pick your Bosnian and Herzegovinian when you were living in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Like you could pick, you were either Bosniak, Croatian, or Serbian. There, not like an American. Here you don't go down and pick who is Irish, who is I don't know. Scottish, you were an American. There it wasn't Bosnian Herzegovinian. I believe it was introduced like in 2010 or 11. I may be wrong in this, but it was you were in this country, but you weren't really a part of this country. So it was like. So when that whole thing happened, Serbia didn't like that. They didn't like that Croatia wanted independence. They didn't like that Bosnia wanted independence. And there's a lot of issues there, and I'm not going to get into it because each one of these nations has their own version of the war. And till this day, there's a lot of issues there that are boiling, especially in Bosnia and Herzegovina. So I'm going to just encourage people who are watching this to look up on their own research. Right. Feel free to talk to people who might know about this, but just be cognizant of the fact that, issues are still not resolved.
Yeah, and we understand and value, actually, that you're providing your perspective,
yes.
right? And this means it's your lived perspective. And that's one of the reasons why it's exciting having you here. But you're not trying to provide a historian's perspective or, a political perspective. You're trying to say, here's who I am, here's what I experience, and here's what I understand of what I experience.
Yes.
And that's great. Like that's I think valuable conversation to have. One of the other things as I read that for me was, I don't know if it was quite shocking, but it was jarring, I guess would be the word. When I read it, I was like, oh, wow. It was a good, I think, illustration to give people an idea of the difficulties in where you grew up. So one of the things that I learned was that all of these people that we're talking about speak the same language, but so they speak just like we're speaking English, but one uses Cyrillic alphabet and the other group, or maybe multiple groups, I don't know, use the Latin alphabet. And so that would be like the two of us sitting here speaking English, and then we go to write something down and we're using completely different lettering system to be able to write what we're right. That's what happened.
Yeah. So there are 3 official languages: Serbian, Bosnian, and Croatian.
Okay.
I usually describe the difference as like English, American English, English, Australian English. So there are differences.
Okay.
Yeah, there's difference.
Yeah.
So, for example, everyone in Bosnia and Herzegovina and in that area, we all look exactly alike. Mm-hmm. So, but the moment someone starts talking, I can tell immediately if they're Bosniak or they're Serbian or Croatian.
And this is in the same geographic area.
Yes.
That people will talk distinctly different.
Yes, correct.
Wow.
And also depends also where you are. So in Croatia, Croatians also have different accents. If you're in the south, it's a different accent. And if you're in the north, it's a different accent. Right. Like Rijeka, where I was born, has a really interesting accent, and they have an interesting use of words, which it brings a smile to my face because I actually went back there and spent my gap year there before I came to the U.S. to study. So it was really fascinating to me to kind of come with my own accent in Croatian and come there, and they immediately knew I wasn't from Rijeka. They knew that. Right. But yeah, so there's differences even between languages, So I actually learned Cyrillic. It was part of our course, part of the course in your elementary school. Okay. I believe we learned it in 4th grade. So I know how to read and write Cyrillics. We write in Latin, but Serbians also know how to write in Latin, and they use I think that's how I call it, Latin alphabet, right? Just regular alphabet. So but yeah. So you've got Bosniaks, and we can completely understand each other. Especially those who live in Bosnia and Herzegovina, they can understand each other. But sometimes it's difficult to understand some Croatians who live in the north because they have a lot of interesting accents.
Oh, okay.
So it's but it's the same. Basically, I don't want to say it's the same language because I'm disrespecting cultures when I say that, But we can understand each other, know. So and they are recognized as individual languages. So I kind of speak 3 languages immediately, but technically it's the same language.
Right.
So
yeah, I get it. It would be like if there was an Aussie here, and I said, we speak the same language. They would take exception to that. Yeah. But we can speak to one another.
Yes.
There are some real differences as well.
Yes, and the culture is really similar to, Croatians who live in Bosnia and Herzegovina. We have even some of our culture that's not the same, depending on where you live. Just like in the U.S., you've got cultural stuff that the South does compared to the North, East, and West. A lot of times people talk a lot about how East is really different than the West Coast. On the East, people are always in a rush. They're always doing high achievers type thing, while in the West, people know how to a little bit chill and take the time, and still are high achievers, but and so we have something similar in that area as well. But it is interesting when you learn about that, because a lot of times I've had Americans ask me so do you understand Serbian? And I'm like, I do. So it's the same language? Well, yes, but not really. So I don't. I want to make sure that whoever's watching this knows that we do understand each other, but
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's separate. They're considered separate languages.
Yeah. So I'm going to just pull up a couple of pictures of some photos I found from the war itself, and then maybe have you talk a little bit about, even though you were fortunate enough to be able to go to Croatia for a period of time, and of course you were young, so you don't remember these things, but your father was there fighting, and just maybe talking a little bit about what this war was like for the country. So let me just bring these up, and as I looked at these, so like this one in particular, when I saw it, it's funny, because the events that are happening right now, it immediately made me think of Ukraine. And so this, as I saw this picture, I'm like, oh, this is like urban warfare that's happening here. These are cities, and people are getting bombed out of their homes. Any public spaces are probably getting destroyed. I don't know. Do you want to talk about that at all, or what was that like as far as what your parents talked about, with that happening?
Yeah. So growing up as a Croatian, we definitely did a lot of the never forget type remembrance days, especially for veterans. And there's so many people who suffering from PTSD. I don't even want to go into like what women had to suffer, and assaults and all these things, and
yes.
I just like having to leave your homeland and go somewhere else. And there's a lot of people who moved abroad. We have huge amounts of people living in Germany, Switzerland, Austria, Australia. We have a lot of people living in Scandinavia. There's also a lot of immigrants in the US, and there's clusters of immigrants, because just like what's happening in Ukraine right now, there were countries that were taking in refugees. And my mom, actually, she knew about this, and she had an offer to go to the US. And I was wondering, I was like, hey, why didn't you take that offer? Maybe your life could have been like completely different.
Right.
How would it be for all your kids to have grown up in the US? And what she told me honestly broke my heart, because she said, and I'm going to also tell another story about the Ukrainian war, which ties into this as well. But my mom said, why would I go into a foreign land where I don't speak the language, I don't understand the culture, I don't understand the customs, when I could fight and stay and do anything? Like, I waited till the very last bus. I went to my family members. If it wasn't safe there, I would have gone somewhere else where it was safe, but I couldn't leave my culture and go to a foreign land.
Right.
And I don't think anyone wants to leave their homeland.
Right.
There are very rare people who leave because they really want to,
right.
or they feel more, at home in a different culture. And so now when the Ukrainian war was happening, a lot of trauma has been brought up in the Balkans. When you're seeing just like, when you hear them speak, it's a very similar language. It's a similar culture. You're in that Eastern European group, and it's just kind of like it's bringing a lot of memories and flashbacks for people that are not great memories to remember. I asked my dad, hey, if it gets really bad, and especially because there were some of these Serbia is really close with Russia, so there were some threats that, because Serbian area in Bosnia and Herzegovina is called Republika Srpska, and they still want to secede. And as far as I know, the Croatian area wants to secede as well. So there were some threats that maybe this would be happening. And I told my mom and dad, hey, if this happens, you are on the first plane out to Washington, D.C. My dad said, thank you very much, but I have not left my homeland during all of these other regimes. And when I was in the war, I did not leave my homeland, and I'm not planning to leave it now.
Wow.
This is my homeland. This is where I stay. And I think this is really important to know none of those refugees you see in Ukraine are just happily putting on bags and leaving. This is horrendous. And you pulled up these pictures, and I gotta tell you, I really, really rarely look at pictures like this from the war in Bosnia. Angelina Jolie made a movie there. It's called In the Land of, I believe, Blood and Honey, or something, or like In the Land of Honey and Blood, something like that. And it's been out, I think, for about 10 years. Yeah. I've tried to watch it multiple times, and I always turn it off after the first basically scene, because it's too difficult to watch.
Yeah.
Like, and many, I didn't even see the reviews, so maybe it's a really bad movie, maybe it's a not an accurate movie, maybe it's a great movie, I don't know. She did a lot of refugee work in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I can't get myself to watch it because it's too difficult. It's too difficult listening to your own language and seeing what this is going on. Also, I need to say I'm a huge empath. For me, when somebody's telling me their story and their pain, I feel it. Yeah. And it's and like for my sanity, I sometimes have to like look back and not look at that. So it's when you show up pictures like this, I'm just seeing, whether that was a Serbian, a Bosniak, or Croatian, somebody's home just got destroyed. Yeah. Somebody just had to live maybe in horrible poverty. Maybe they lost their significant other. Maybe they lost their parents, their children. Who knows what happened? Maybe they lost someone and never found it. Still, till this day, they don't know what happened. Right. That is just absolutely horrible.
Yeah. What's interesting about what you're sharing and what I know we're going to eventually talk about, and I hadn't thought about it until you just kind of mentioned some of those things, is your story kind of represents both. So with immigrants, I think there are kind of these two threads you can pull on. And one is, like you said, to be aware. People don't leave their home country unless something pretty serious is going on. And so in the scenario you're describing, you might describe it as they're being pushed. Like they're not wanting to do it, they're having to do it to survive. And that's part of your story, right? When you were born and eventually you were able to come back. But then there's another story, which we'll get to eventually, which is you came here because you were drawn to some things, right? And so either one of those are fascinating stories. And that's part of what immigrants, I think, represent. And if and when, if you know someone who is from somewhere else who came here, if and when they're willing to talk about that, to me, it's always worth listening, And so I appreciate you sharing with us.
Thank you for providing a way to share this in a channel. Yeah, of course. And for being interested in this. I think a lot of people didn't know that story, which is why I was so compelled to share. Yeah. When I got my citizenship, I wanted to share a little bit of the background and why I had no idea.
We talked and never gotten into that. And I'm so glad you shared that. It's an amazing story. So let me share one other picture that might represent a little bit of what you're talking about that you just mentioned to me, and that is, you want to talk about this a little bit in terms of, so we're talking about, the country being, torn apart by war, really in the midst of war, and eventually, the next thing we'll get to is you coming back and growing up there. But you want to talk about this building?
Yeah, so this is a building in Mostar. It's in a place called the Spanish Square, Španski Trg. That's the name of the area. And it was built during the Austro-Hungarian rule in that area. And you see it here before it was renovated. And you can see on the outside there's bullet holes. If you see down there at the front door, like in front of the doors, these beautiful arches that you see there's like a bunch of holes and stuff. Those are all bullet holes. And, it's just... you can see the facade is just torn off of it in different parts and exposed brick and the bullet holes. Unfortunately, there's a lot of buildings like this still in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Like again, it's been 30 years since the war, and almost 30 years, right? Yeah. So it's just really difficult to see stuff like this. And this is a school. It's a building where there's 2 schools under one roof. Now there's 3 schools under one roof. But it was 2 schools under one roof, and I'm going to explain this because this is all over Bosnia and Herzegovina. Because it's the most probably diverse country of, the countries that had that war when Croatia, Serbia, and Bosnia got into the war. We had, cities that had a lot of Bosniaks or Muslims, and we had cities that had also a big population of Serbians or Orthodox, and then we had a big population of Croatians. So what they did is they separated schools. So here, this is a majority Croatian city. It's called Mostar, and it's majority Croatian. So you had Croatian students going, there were 2 shifts, morning and afternoon one. One group of people was going to the morning, and it might have been Croatians, but it doesn't matter which shift they went to.
Right.
They went to a separate shift in school. And then there was another group of people, which was Bosniaks, which are the second biggest citizens in this town. And then there's a smaller population of Serbians. So they just bundled Serbians together with Bosniaks. So you had a shift where Croatians, a school schedule where Croatians went to school. And then there was about an hour time difference between these two. And then the second shift came in school, which was Bosniaks and Serbians.
Wow.
So it was, purposely separated these 2 schools and not even giving them a chance to see each other in the corridors.
Right.
Because there's a lot of hate still. There's like fights that come out just because someone is of a different religion or different ethnicity. And this is not the case just in Mostar. This is all over the place.
Right.
In my little hometown, is the vast majority of people is Croatian, but we have clusters of Bosniaks or Muslims. So growing up, there's a Muslim side of the town and there's a Croatian side of the town. There are Muslims villages. You know how I told you I grew up in a village?
Yep.
So it's like clusters of neighborhoods.
Yeah.
So they're villages because if you see the area, it's like, we live in the countryside basically. But I don't like saying countryside because it means something completely different in the U.S.
Okay.
It's like these vast, big farms. Right. That's not it. It's like mountains and small little backyard farms, backyard animals. So we had Muslim villages and Croatian villages, and Croatians were the majority. So they didn't have enough Muslims to separate them from Croatians. And for example, I didn't even meet a Muslim until we went to high school. So they, I believe they went to separate schools in elementary school. And then in high school, they had to bundle us together because there wasn't enough students. And I had two girls who went to school with me in high school, in a Croatian high school, who went to school who were Muslims. And then you know how you have to take English classes, you have to take Croatian classes. So they were exempted from going to Croatian. They would do Bosnian. And then instead of we had religion, which was Christian and Bible studies. So instead of that, they went to just do general religion because they weren't forced to obviously listen. They were Muslims, so they weren't forced to listen to Christian teachings. And so this is a thing that happens all over the place. What's really interesting about this school, it's 2 schools under one roof, but I cannot remember the actual date. It might have been 2004 or something like that. There's a school that opened here that's called United World College, and there's multiple schools across the world. They tend to open in places where there used to be some type of conflict.
Okay.
But there's one also in New Mexico, in the US, there's one in Canada. So it doesn't necessarily mean that, but it was specifically opened in Bosnia and Herzegovina with this goal of trying to bring Serbians, Croatians, and Bosniaks into one school under one roof. So there's now 3 schools under one roof. 2 are the separate ones, and then you've got the international high school, and it's international baccalaureate, so it's IB diploma, and you study in English. And I graduated, so I went to a Croatian high school until my sophomore year. Then I got a full scholarship to go to this international boarding school.
Yep.
And then from there, I finished my junior and senior year there. Right. And I graduated in a class of 50 students, only 50 students, and there were 33 different nationalities in that class.
Wow.
So that just tells you, there were students from all over the place. We had students from the U.S., from all parts of Africa, from all parts of Europe. I had my first year roommate was German. My second year roommate.
So people are actually coming there from other countries.
Yes, it's a boarding school. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and you do your junior senior year. Yeah, and I was one of the 25 students that year from Bosnia and Herzegovina who got in, and I believe all of us got full scholarships because there was no way we could afford that. Coming from Bosnia and Herzegovina, you couldn't really afford the scholarship there. And now, if you have a picture to pull up how it looks now, because it was renovated in 2009. If you got it, but basically it's renovated now, which is really, really awesome.
Yeah,
and it's restored.
I don't have it here in front of me.
Awesome.
Actually, maybe I do. Let me see. Here we go.
It's restored to its full glory, which I absolutely love. I mean, that just looks beautiful.
Yep.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So let me show another picture here, which I thought was amazing. So when you came back with your mom, your mom brought you back, this was the area right? That you grew up in, right?
Yes.
Because I sent this to you. I was trying to do a little research, and I think maybe you had told me, and I was trying to confirm. And I looked at this picture, and I was like, "This is an amazing, beautiful place." I can't imagine like growing up there. It looks like a wonderful place. So can we talk about that a little bit? Like, where?
Yeah, this is called. So the area, the whole town and area is called Prozorama.
Yeah.
But the town itself is Prozor.
Okay.
The rest is, it's considered under Rama, but Rama is more, as I mentioned, the cluster of villages.
Yeah.
So that main big peninsula that you see in the middle,
Yep.
that's where I grew up, and
Oh,
that's
really?
called Shchit. Yes.
You grew up right there.
Right there. Yeah.
Wow.
It's absolutely gorgeous. I cannot explain to you.
Did you, as a kid, were you aware of like how amazing this place is, or just like, whatever, this is where I grew up?
No, I was not.
Yeah.
I was not aware of how
Yeah.
amazing this place is. I definitely cherish it more as an adult now.
Yeah.
But I definitely loved my summers because we went to a lake every single day.
Yeah.
We would swim all the time. Like everyone from the village would come together, and we would just like spend basically all day long at the beach.
Yeah.
Which was at the lakefront area. So that was really, really amazing. But one thing that I want to say about this, which is interesting, I think all of us are a little more grateful for our hometowns when we grow up.
Yes.
Yeah, we
I think so.
We
Yep.
cherish things maybe that we didn't cherish before, and like now I understand my parents why they wouldn't want to leave this, and because this is absolutely gorgeous. I mean, they have a beautiful garden with all of the produce that they, plant themselves and harvest. We always had potatoes and pumpkins and tomatoes and cucumbers,
Wow.
green salads, onions. My mom is preparing lunch and she goes down to the garden and gets 90% of ingredients from the garden. It's amazing. Beans, all that stuff. We also still to this day, actually, my parents have goats. We have usually like 1 or 2 goats and 2, 3, 4 kids,
Yeah.
So that's it's like backyard animals. Usually
Yep.
people had before pigs, they had at least 1 cow per household. They also had chickens.
Let's say
So-
Frederick's version of this would be chickens.
Yes.
A lot of people have chickens.
Yes,
now,
a lot of people
so,
have chickens.
yeah.
I think chickens are much easier to take care of than cows and pigs.
I would imagine so.
Yeah, and like goats are really demanding as well.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
My grandpa, who sadly passed away a few years back, maybe even actually kind of pretty long time ago, 12 years ago, he had sheep, so he had a bunch
Wow.
of those, and my uncle is taking care of some of that stuff now. So yeah, this is absolutely gorgeous, and this is an artificial lake. So it used
Okay.
to be a river.
Is that at the far end, a dam maybe?
Yes,
Okay.
correct. And
All
it's
right.
producing electricity. That's the main
Yeah.
source of income for or revenue for this town.
Now, how long is this lake? Well, it was there when you were a kid, so it's been there for quite a while.
Yes, I
guess,
think
yeah.
it was made into a lake in 1960s.
Okay.
So it's been a while.
Yeah.
It used to be valleys and there was a huge river going through it.
Yeah.
A lot of people actually are sad that it was made into a lake because it was a really agricultural area. And I think the government kind of cheated people because they didn't really get paid a lot of money to move. And what happens when the lake goes down, because they have to, increase and decrease the level of the
Sure.
water depending on whatever they need
Yep.
for the
Electricity.
production of electricity.
Yeah.
Yeah. When it goes down, you can actually see the old houses made
Okay.
out of stone. You can see old graveyards.
Oh,
There's
wow.
also a mosque. So this right here, the corner that's close to us is actually
Yep.
a Muslim village.
Okay.
And you can
with the
see
red house, red
Yes.
roofs. Yeah.
Yes, so and you can see it used to be down there in the valley. So this was the
Yeah.
peak of the
Yeah.
top. So when the lake goes down to a certain point, you can actually see the top of the mosque
Oh,
that
okay.
used to
Oh,
that is
really?
now
Wow.
underneath the water. Yeah.
So this is a picturesque place. It seems like a beautiful place. I could imagine like vacationing here, but coming back from a war, your mom coming back, did this area receive damage, or what was the state of this place when your mom came back? What was it like?
So from what I know, it
Yeah.
didn't sustain much damage,
Okay.
which was really good.
Yeah.
The town did. There's still some areas with bullet holes and
Yeah.
still some like high-rise buildings. They're not super high-rise. When I say high-rise, they're not really big, but apartment
Multi-level,
buildings. Yeah,
yeah.
multi-level
Yeah.
residential homes who were damaged. But I think we got kind of lucky because
Yeah.
of the mountains. It's very difficult to get across those. So most of the like defending army was up in the mountains and just like
Yeah.
defending it from up there. So that's my understanding of it.
Okay, yeah.
I've asked my dad a few times about this and some
Yeah.
other people, and I've gotten mixed stories, and I think this might be part of the painful history that I don't have the tools to help them deal with it as they talk about it. I can be curious about it, but this is the part that I don't know enough
Yeah.
about. I do know that when they came back, my dad was one of the main people, and while the war was still going on, right now you see a lot of people sending aid to Ukraine. My dad was one of the main organizers to collect that aid. So I
Okay.
remember him going to Germany often, and he got a driver's license that can drive trucks and everything. So
Yeah.
he'd get these huge trucks filled with needs, any aid that people needed. And I actually remember when we came back, our house was always filled with refugees coming in and out, and we didn't ask questions. We didn't ask what kind of refugee you are.
Right.
So it was just, hey, you are in need of baby diapers, you're getting baby diapers. You are
Yeah.
in need of baby formula, here's baby formula. You're in need of cans and anything like the food or anything you need. My dad had multiple factories filled with this aid that he collected all over the place, and good people always exist everywhere. So I know everyone is really grateful for the help that we have received as well after the war.
Yeah.
And so I did ask my dad to clarify this summer when I was there, do I remember right, or did our phone always ring and there were always refugees at the door? He's like, no, you remember that,
Yeah.
right? That was,
oh, wow.
that was right, yeah.
So your house was kind of like a focal point for
Yeah.
providing help to people. And I was listening to a woman speak who was a refugee from the Afghan war, and she said something, and it seemed really well put. So I'll just quote her, and then you can maybe talk a little bit about how your parents kind of lived in light of this. She said, war is dislocating. It can dislodge empathy, hope, and joy, and replace them with fear. And you're talking about what your parents were providing to people. It seems like they were like a beacon, in the midst of that fear that can pop up and dislocate you. So is that kind of what was happening there, you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really powerful statement, and I've read a lot about the Afghan war and the situation in Afghanistan. I recently finished the book I Am Malala. I know I'm a little late to that train. I know about her. I've read her story, but I never read the book from about her life and what happened. And the way she talks about Afghanistan, she doesn't live there anymore, but she misses everything. She misses the morning sunlight, living in the valleys. She misses, the food they ate, the neighborhood, just that feeling of community and all this stuff. Like it's not easy immigrating in a different country. That's not an easy feat. It's very difficult. It's very emotionally draining. It's physically draining, depending on what's going on in your life that you had to leave. And especially if you have to leave by yourself or leave everyone else, or if you're leaving because of a war, you're dealing with a lot of trauma also. So it's really, really sad. And I hope that my parents did bring hope to a lot of people.
It sounds like they did.
I do know my dad, even till this day, has people who reach out to him and say, I still owe you one.
Wow.
Even though they don't owe him
Right.
anything, but they still come and say, I still owe you one because, and they're always going to help my dad, whatever he needs, because of what he did to them post-war. And it's and probably during the war as well. So, I'm extremely proud of my parents.
Yeah.
I have no idea where they got that courage from.
Yeah.
They have always been great partners. They've always been great on relying on each other, and their love for each other is humongous.
Yeah.
And I think they're not perfect parents. No parent is perfect. And if a parent is listening to this and thinks my parents are just amazing, I think they're amazing. But everyone can always do better, but the thing is, we are not perfect. We're never going to be perfect. There's no perfection, doesn't exist. And I think when I look at my parents, I hope I'm as half a parent one day to my future kids as they were to me and my siblings, because I am in awe of them. I can't believe, and they're so optimistic. my dad has this, like, he is truly a person who is like, I don't know, don't worry about tomorrow. Today, enjoy today. Enjoy today. My mom and dad, both of them, have huge faith in God. God is really important to them. And I think that's really what got them through all of this stuff, because you have to cling on to something. And if you don't cling on hope and that something around the corner will get better, very easily.
It can get dark.
Yeah. And you can die from heartbreak. You can die from sadness. Like it's very important to try to hold on to something. So I am extremely happy and proud and just amazed by my parents.
When they were providing these things for people, and even sounds like a roof over their head at times, right? Because people were staying with y'all. Was that happening?
I don't think so.
No, okay.
I don't think they were just getting
in,
8
getting
packages.
Things.
Yeah.
Okay, so it was kind of like a central location
Yeah.
for goods and supplies, and he would go pick them up and bring stuff back. And
it's a small town. So just like imagine if you're in a really small neighborhood and there's this one neighbor who, is really great at, I don't know, at fixing things. Yeah. So the whole neighborhood says, oh, just go see, I don't know, Brad. Go see Brad. Yeah. He's going to help you out. That was my dad.
Okay.
And so even till this day, my dad has volunteered for Red Cross for like basically his whole life. He is a blood donor. He's O negative, which I'm as well, which is a universal donor. Hey, that's awesome. So he has been donating blood, I think, for like 30, 40 years. So even till this day, there's people that are going to like help him out and do favors for him, because he has such a good heart. And sometimes people who have good hearts, they don't have much materialistically around them. Our house is not the prettiest. We never had the newest car. I never could go and splurge money on certain things. Like, we had enough. We had roof over our head. We had food. We had education. We always whatever is needed for school, we had those resources. But we were not rich. We were not a rich family, that's for sure. And so, but and like a lot of times you're gonna meet people who are similar to my parents, who don't have much, but would give even the code that they have on the only code they have that's providing warmth from them, they're going to give it to someone else.
Yeah, and one of the things that you've mentioned several times now, that your father provided for you, and was very important to him, obviously, was the education, which eventually was that pathway to the United States. So talk a little bit about how that happened. How did you get here?
Yeah. I want to mention that my dad is one of 8. So he has 6 brothers and 1 sister. And he is the only one who got a college degree from all of them. And my mom, my mom is one of 5. And she only got 6 grades of elementary school. So my mom didn't even finish elementary school. Yeah. She grew up in the mountains in this beautiful home of mine. She grew up in the mountains, and she was meant to. I believe she went to 4th grade, to regular school 4th grade, and then she was supposed to continue it, but some war happened. I don't know which one. Something happened why she couldn't go to school immediately. Okay. And then when she married my dad was really about education, and he wanted her to go and get as much school done as possible. And just like is it called GRE for
high school equivalency?
Yes. So just like that, she could get the same thing for elementary school. She went and got her 5th grade and 6th grade completed. She got those, and she was going to go to 7th and 8th grade, and that's when the war happened in the 90s. Okay. So
that's when a different war happened.
Yes. I don't know what happened the first time.
That's the other crazy thing is you're talking about, there was this war and then there was this other. It's like, wow, these people have a history of having to deal with
a lot of stuff.
Tragedy and war.
But I don't remember if it was the war the first time around. So I can't. So I'm probably incorrect about that because she was born in 1960. Okay. So it couldn't be World War I or World War II. Right. Yeah. So it had to have been something else. Yeah. But I know something stopped her. Something prevented her from finishing elementary school. Yeah. And she had to go help. She was a woman, and she's a woman, so a woman at that time had to learn how to be housewives and take care of the household. All that stuff. So. So my mom, and this is why it's important for my family and my parents to get us as far as possible in education because they know the value of education.
Right.
And so my parents had a very typical marriage, which is my mom was a stay-at-home mom. She, was raising 4 kids, and her, her job, which was super important, is taking care of the households and the kids. My dad was the provider, and he worked. And then, but my dad, every time he came back from work, he played with us and would tell my mom, "Go rest. I'm gonna take them right now. You're playing like, I'm in charge of the kids now." He's just, my older sister just had a baby and he became a grandpa, and he's just obsessed with it. They both are amazing grandparents, but yes, he is always really playful. He comes up with really fun games. Kids like him, so he would, especially in the summer, I remember he'd come home from work around 4 or 5, and we'd all be running, "Daddy's home, Daddy's home," and then we would be literally waiting with our equipment to go swimming, and then he'd just get us, "Okay, let's go," and we'd go immediately to the lake. So they worked really well as in a partnership, and they still do. And they're now in well-deserved retirement. My dad is almost retired, but my mom is when the last kid left the house, she's like, "I can relax a little bit now." So she still has goats though, so she takes care of those still. And they are a lot of work too. So that's why the education was so important to my parents. So they always kind of pushed us to go and educate, to study, and all that stuff. It was and in my country you don't really build homes like they do here in the US. Like you build homes on your own, and so my parents lived in my grandpa's house, and just to explain a little bit how it works is the sons of the house, they stay in grandpa's house, right? Yep. And then women, they get married and they leave to go live with their in-laws. Yep. That's kind of how it is. So you live with your in-laws. Yep. And so but my dad had 6 other brothers, and that's a lot to split in one house. Yeah. So he really wanted to have a house of his own, so he built a house, but he built it step by step because they built it until they ran out of money. Then they built a little bit again, and then they ran out of money. Yeah. The most important thing is my grandma was getting really sick, so she was living in the mountains. That's my maternal grandma, my mom's mom. So we wanted to get her down to live with us, and so we got her into the we basically built a house so she can get in as far first as she could get in there, and then they built another room for us, for my older sister and me, to go to have a place to study, a peaceful place so we can study and focus on that. So we slowly, I just wanted to explain that, because if you go to Bosnia,
it wasn't poof, there's a house.
Yeah, not like here. It's they already kind of assembled the house and they just put them together like Legos. Right. Yeah, that's not what happens there. Maybe it's gonna come to there, but I don't know. But yeah, so you kind of build the house on your own. Right. And and to me, it's I just wanted to explain that because my parents, it was so important to them for us to have a peaceful place where we can study. Fast forward to high school, my older sister's preparing to go to college. She was already in college, and it's a sophomore year. And I would go to school with my dad because we lived about 15 minutes driving distance from the town where there was a high school. I walked to my elementary school until 8th grade. Elementary and middle school were together, and it was about a mile walking back and forth. I think it was about a mile. I might be wrong, but it was 2 kilometers. Right. I still kind of get mixed up with miles and kilometers, but into high school I couldn't walk because it was a driving distance, and so I would go with my dad in the morning, and then I would wait for him to be done with work, and I would just go into his office, or I would go for coffee with my friends. And one day I told him, "Hey, I'm done. I'm going to go to the office. I have some homework to do. Can I use the conference room?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, sure. If you want to go, I have a surprise for you in my office. I'm out on an errand. I have a surprise for you." I thought it was money. I was a high school kid. I wanted money. So I come there, and there's just this little newspaper ad. This was 2008. So newspaper ad. And I'm reading the newspaper ad, and I was like, "What is this?" And I'm like, "I thought he was going to leave me money. This is weird." And it was an ad for United World College. And it was an ad, and he basically told me, "You're an excellent student. You speak English excellent. You should apply to this. They're giving out scholarships, and it's an international high school." And so basically, because my dad saw that ad and encouraged me to apply, put my life completely in a different trajectory.
Yeah.
I thought I was just gonna end up in Croatia, you know.
Yeah.
I didn't even want to get married, you know. I wasn't really interested in marriage and stuff. I just wanted to go to Croatia, maybe live at the beach and you know, study something that I'm interested in, you know, and like that type of stuff. Maybe marry a Croatian one day. Like that was kind of like what I was thinking, but and maybe have kids one day, that stuff. But this like ad just completely put me in a different trajectory. So I applied. I was one of the 25 recipients of a full scholarship from Bosnia and Herzegovina. And then it was a boarding school. I moved to Mostar. That's where I spent my 2 last years.
And how far away was that?
About 2 hours.
Okay.
Yeah, it depends on traffic. And we got a lot of, you saw the mountains, so there's a lot of like curvy roads. So yeah, I went there to school. I finished that, graduated. I became a Shelby Davis scholar. Shelby Davis is a Wall Street investor, and he's a huge philanthropist. Him and his wife Gail have a big foundation, and they're giving out scholarships. And there's about 100 universities and colleges that partner with the Davis Foundation. And so when I graduated, became a Davis scholar, my world just opened up. I no longer had the opportunity just to go to Croatia to study, to continue my studies. I no longer had maybe I'll go to Germany, or maybe I'll go to the UK. It was just like the world is open. You know, you can go to the US, to Canada, you can even go to Asia. Like it was just like all over the place. And so I ended up applying, but before I did, I took a gap year. This was really important to me because United World College was difficult. It was a lot of, you know, studying. I switched all classes, even biology and chemistry that are really difficult. I switched it into studying and learning in English. You know, that had to be an adjustment. And there was just a lot of people telling me what to do. You know, you take the best students from other high schools and you drop them in here, and there you just have a lot of voices that are telling you, this is what you should do, this is where you should go to school. So I took a year off, took a break, went back to where I was living as a refugee, to Rijeka, volunteered there, and spent time with my aunt, and really reconnected to that time period. And I volunteered in multiple different organizations. One of them was an organization that dealt with behavioral issues. I also worked in an organization, and this was all volunteer work, because it was important for me just to get out of the mindset of where I want to go to school and get out of like the community that was telling me what I should do. I just wanted to like hear my voice.
Yeah. And of course, I mean, it seems like you're reconnecting with a community that once was taking care of you, right? I mean, your aunt specifically, but that greater community there. And so now you're kind of, did you look at it that way? Like you're kind of reconnecting, giving back to a place that was responsible for taking care of you for a time, or?
Yes. And it's like, it's interesting because I wasn't planning to go there. I just knew I didn't know where I wanted to go to school. And I was like, what should I do? And I worked every summer. I worked every summer in Dubrovnik, which is a major tourist point. And that's where Game of Thrones was, by the way. That's King's Landing. Yeah. So definitely visit if you haven't been yet. It's beautiful. But I worked there as a waitress every summer. I started as an ice cream, like I was in an ice cream I don't know how you call it, like
server. Ice cream
girl. That was so ice cream girl. I love that. That was so fun. There was this fun ice cream I loved. It's Milka chocolate. You know, Milka, it's like really famous in Europe. Oh my gosh, with hazelnuts. Maybe I ate more ice cream than I sold. I'm kidding. If my ex-boss is watching this, no, I didn't. So, so I worked there every summer. And so then I worked that time I worked all the way till the end of the season, which was sometimes like almost October. And because I usually would have to go to school back in August. And so I was working, and I just didn't know what I went to. I was like, I just want to take a year off. And years off are not popular in my country. That's really popular in Europe. It's not even that popular in the US either, but it's really popular in Western countries. And I had one friend who was from Austria who was taking a gap year, and she's the one who kind of like planted a seed. And I was like, oh, this actually sounds really great. But because I worked all summer, my idea was to travel because I had money and I wasn't going to go to college. I was like, I want to go travel and explore. And that's when I discovered the like low cost airlines, like in Europe, it's Ryanair. And so I found this really cool, like cheap ticket to go to London, UK. And that was my first ever flight. And my sister, my older sister and I went together.
Oh, that's great.
And it was awesome. We were there for 4 days. We had such a great time.
London's a great city.
And what these low cost airlines do, they fly out of not the main airports. They fly out of the side, like the smaller airports. And one of the smaller airports, so the big airport is Zagreb. That's the capital of Croatia. But we went to a smaller airport, which was Rijeka. So our goal was, let's go say hi to our cousins and our aunt and like, you know, just let's go say hi to our family there. And we'll fly out of there, and then I'm gonna stay with her for like a week because, you know, I've never been there except during the war. So I wanted to see the balcony they talked about where, like, you know, I took my first steps. Right. I wanted to see all those pictures I saw in my mom's, you know, photo album. Like, I wanted to just experience it, and like all these memories they were telling me, I wanted to experience it. And but then I found out that my cousin moved out, so my aunt was by herself. My uncle was a sailor, so he was sailing 8 months out of the year, and he just went on a long trip. So this was the first time my aunt was alone. And he told me, you were sent as an angel. If you don't have to go anywhere, please stay. Yeah. And I said, but I want to volunteer. I want to travel. I want to explore. And then my aunt is like, Rijeka is literally one of the best places to volunteer, and that is true. It has one of the most opportunities for volunteering in that area, like in Croatia and even probably in the whole Balkan. So I stayed there and got involved with these multiple organizations. One of the organizations I also got involved with was a organization for people over 21 with special needs. That was amazing to work with them. I did a lot of art. I did a lot of project organization. At that time, I thought I wanted to study psychology, which is why I was interested in this, like, behavioral issues, special needs. I just wanted to become a psychologist one day. What I didn't know is that I'm really, really good in organizing and animating people and talking to them, which was more the business and project management side, which I figured out later on. Yeah. But like at that time I thought, I was learning about psychology. Right. I talk too much to be a therapist. Like that just wouldn't work for me. But so I ended up volunteering there. And I volunteered also in some faith-based organizations. That was really great as well. And I met a lot of friends there. And then during that time, I got some other opportunities. I went to Italy for like 2.5 weeks to do a volunteer project. I went to Berlin for like about 2 weeks as well. And during that time, I was able to actually listen to what I want. Yeah. And I wanted to go to Canada to study. And so I applied like somewhere to North America. And Canada was my number one choice. Okay. But I wasn't going to get full scholarships in Canada. And the places where I would go were really, really far away. It was all the way on the West Coast. Okay. So I was looking into other opportunities, and there's one school that kept popping up. And I had a lot of my friends who went there because, you know, I took a year off, so I was a year behind them in college. And I had a lot of my friends, and they just raved about this college. And I was like, okay, well, let me look it up. And I actually applied to college, but I was really late because, like, my friends went there, we're going to go there, and they were like, no, don't miss out, come with us. Yeah. And like, you know, so I was like, okay, let me apply, but I was really late. Yeah. So the school was like, hey, we can't take you in this year, but apply next year. And so I was like, okay, let me look up the school. And the school is Hood College. So it's like, you know, I really believe that things come back into your life, like, and you're kind of pushed into a direction you need to be pushed into. Yep. So I applied to Hood College. I applied to multiple other schools too, but Hood College gave me the best scholarship, and it was really situated in the best place. Like a lot of schools are in the middle of nowhere on these big campuses, big universities, you know, 30,000 people. Here, Hood College was a small school, you know, 1,600 undergraduate students and about 1,000 graduate students. And I got a really great scholarships. They covered all of my expenses, including some extra expenses for like health insurance and maybe books and stuff like that. And it was really close to Dallas Airport, Reagan Airport, Baltimore like BMW. I'm like, I have 3 major airports right next to me. I can travel all over the U.S. And if I hate it, I can be on the next plane home. Yeah. Like if it's really that bad, like I'm not going to be in the middle of nowhere.
Easy out.
Yeah, easy out. So that was kind of like a joke, or maybe like something how I was, you know. But the moment I stepped on the U.S. soil, I was like, I'm probably going to stay here. It was like, so that's my educational path. It was a lot of twists and turns. And the way I talk about it, it sounds really easy, right? Like everything sounds easy, but a lot of it was a lot challenging. You know, It was, you know, I was always a straight A student. But, you know, United World College was difficult. Coming to the U.S. was difficult. You know, I moved here by myself. I did have some other Balkan people who went to Hood College, and you can find communities if that's what you really want.
And you knew, did you know some of them before?
Yes, they went to school
so you were
with
coming
me.
Knowing there would be a couple points of contact there.
Yes, there were about like 5 students at Hood already.
Which I'm sure was helpful.
Yes, And actually one person who wasn't a good friend of mine, like it was a friend, but it wasn't like a really good friend of mine in that high school, when we connected, we lived in the same dorm, and he was just my go-to for everything.
Okay.
I'm gonna give a huge shout out to Marco. He's my best friend.
Yeah.
And so basically he just like helped me with everything, like open a bank account, get a US number, just navigate the system here, because it's kind of, and by the way, I came in 2012, and yes, the internet was like widespread and all that stuff, but there were a lot of things that we do today that we didn't do back in 2009, 2012.
Sure.
Like that was kind of the beginning of like this massive
Yeah.
dependency on a tiny little like
Right.
thing in your, So I don't think I even had a smartphone when I first came to the US.
And what did you study at Hood?
I changed my major in my head, not officially. I changed my major about 7 times.
Oh, yeah.
Just so you know.
Right.
So I came in thinking I'm going to be a psychology major.
Yeah.
I took a couple of psychology classes. I was getting A's in everything except psychology. And I was like, well, is it psychology? Is it the classes? Does it mean not trying hard enough? And then I realized maybe I'm not interested in it. And I'm like, but I've always loved psychology and projects. And like, I was referring back to my volunteer years and all that stuff. So I was like, let me figure this out. Like, what am I really passionate about? So I'm like, maybe it's theater. So I took a couple of theater classes. Yeah. I did improv. I love doing it as a hobby. Did not like studying it. Then I was like, oh, maybe I'm gonna like communications. I went literally set into 2 classes for communication. Like I didn't even take a full class. I just sat in a class. I was like, yeah, no, I would not like the media and that type of stuff. So I really, really like hopped a lot around.
Yep.
And then I take this management class. And it was taught by Dr. Wayne Winter from Hood College, who is an amazing professor. Also, huge shout out to him. He was my advisor later on. And I was just like, wait, I love this.
Wow.
I love the study. I even liked accounting. I even liked finances. I even liked, econ was micro econ and macro econ were my favorite classes I took. Like,
so a lot of things clicking at that point.
And then I took one class with Dr. Weaver. You see my accent comes out in certain things, especially if I'm getting tired talking. I talk a lot. Dr. Weaver was my professor for a class called organizational psychology.
Yep.
Loved it. It was all about psychologies and management and organizations and business. So that's when I declared my major, and I did business administration and I did marketing as a minor. So that's what I picked up and ended up studying and graduating with.
Well, those 2 things make a lot of sense with what I know about you and the interactions we've had, over a couple of years. So makes a lot of sense. I could see that. So you were able to see. I think that was really wise too, for you to be able to give yourself the flexibility, like you said, in your own mind. Say, well, let me try this and see what this is like, and let me try that, because sometimes that's the best way to find out, right?
Yes, and I'm not afraid of trying things, which is that's I think why I've been able to like get here and live here and just be far away from family and everything. And when I first joined here, it wasn't, WhatsApp and texting your family. It was, we would do like once a month Skype sessions, and like I would email my parents. My parents were just knowing how to use smartphones. And I got my first iPhone, my sophomore year in college.
Yeah.
So like I was using a phone that could go on internet, but was really slow.
Right.
So it's like, it wasn't really, again, it wasn't that widespread that, I was using it. And so it was a lot of that, but because I was so curious and I was so fascinated by the US and the US culture, I grew up watching Seinfeld and Friends. That's how I learned English. I watched Seinfeld and Friends, and we loved comedy shows as a family to watch, and and we would, especially kids, we would listen to really high like volume, so you would have Croatian subtitles and English, and your brain would automatically be learning, which is amazing. So I recommend this to everyone. The best way to learn your language is put the subtitles of the language and listen to really high up. If you want to learn Spanish, it would be English subtitles with Spanish speaking. That's the easiest ways to learn it. And listening to like TV shows and that type of stuff, it's really great, because then you also get to learn the cultural, like to know the jokes of the culture.
So would you guys? So you did that at home?
Yes.
So would you guys, like your brothers or your sister, you have a brother too?
I have an older sister, a younger brother, and a younger sister. There's
so you all be like quoting Seinfeld to one another at times?
Yeah, it was like jokes and stuff.
Yeah, sure.
And it was, and I didn't really know how well I spoke English until my teachers and professors started pointing it out. Okay. Because I was, I guess, much better than, this is like me tapping myself on the shoulder, but this is me based on what they said. And actually, one of my professors, who was actually a substitute teacher in my 5th grade, he pointed at me. His name is Damir Mishra. He's an amazing guy. He pointed at me and he said, this girl's going to go far. Yeah. And like, you you don't think words impact much, but like if teachers and professors are listening to this, they are so important in a kid's life. Yeah. And, you know, I had a great support system at home, but imagine if I didn't have a great support system at home and there was a teacher who believed so much in me, you know? Yeah. And so like, so I had teachers started pointing it out, and then, you know, my dad, he didn't know I speak English well because he doesn't speak English. Yeah. You know, that's why he took that, he was reading newspapers, saw that ad, and it was tiny. I actually I still have that little like newspaper ad. And
okay.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. He you know.
Well, that's funny. You saying that you know, you speaking English, but he didn't, so he wouldn't know. It's like my daughter speaks Korean, and I have no idea how well she speaks Korean.
You just know
I don't understand any of it, you know.
Yes.
But she, you know, she hangs out with friends who are Korean. They speak all the time, so I assume it must be pretty decent. But yeah, so part of, obviously, like a massive part of learning and integrating with another culture is going to be language, and that's a lot of what you've been talking about. But when we talked ahead of time, you shared a few stories, and there's a lot more to it, of course, than that. And so what was it like, or what is it like even, trying to, you know, embrace a new culture, become part of it, but at the same time loving where you were from and wanting to hold on to pieces of that? Talk about that some. What is that like? Yeah,
so I think everyone needs to know that there's probably a big difference between someone who's a huge extrovert and someone who's a huge introvert. Mm-hmm. As an extrovert and as a curious person, I just went to see everything. Like all of a sudden, I was in the TV shows I watched growing up. Like everything was a TV show to me, especially when I first came to New York City. Huh. Like, what? Like I'm in New York City? Like this was just unbelievable. Yeah. So for me, the way I saw it is I wanted to learn. I thought it was respectful of me to learn as much as possible about the U.S. culture. Right. And, you know, I wanted to be a part of it, but I also didn't want to lose myself. So a lot of my friends know basics of Croatian. I taught them how to say good night. I taught them how to say I love you. Yeah. I taught them how to say how are you. You know, basics like that. And then they would, you know, often say, this is my Croatian friend. You know, they didn't try to demean who I was and on my culture. I was really happy to talk about my culture. I was, you know, a lot of times people didn't even know really where Croatia is, so I had to explain it. And, you know, I would introduce myself as being from Croatia because I am Croatian, and if I would say Bosnia and they would think I'm Bosniak, that's a false representation of who I am. Right. So I would explain to them, I'm Croatian, I was born in Croatia, and I grew up in Bosnia and Herzegovina. When I would say Bosnia and Herzegovina, they would be like, Boston? Like what right. Yeah, like what is that? Or what are you saying? And I always say Bosnia and Herzegovina, because if you just say Bosnia, there's a huge south part of the country that you are saying it doesn't exist. Right. And if you're saying Bosnia and you know you're just Croatians don't like that, like there's Herzegovina, like that's right. a big part of it too. Yeah. And if I would say just Bosnia, a lot of times, especially with older people, they would come to me and say, oh my God, is it okay there now? Because they would remember seeing news about the war in Bosnia. Yes. And then I even had people ask me, there's running water and electricity there. Really? And so there's a lot of education that I had to do, which I had nothing against it. I was happy when there's curious people that wanted to learn about my culture. And then, you know, when I would go to my friends would ask me if I would want to come celebrate Thanksgiving with them or Christmas, because I would only go home during the summers. I wouldn't go home during Christmas. And also Hood College had a host family program, and they matched us with a local family, and that family for me was Catherine and Michael Mack, who I'm still in contact with till this day, and I consider them family. Yeah. And they took me and another girl in who also came from Bosnia and Herzegovina that year, Ivana. Her name is Ivana, just like my little sister. And we the two of us spent our first Christmas with them, and that was really difficult now being home. Yeah. But I woke up in like this American Christmas. I literally felt like Home Alone, that movie. You know, I woke up and I was like, what? Like they decorate like Americans decorate the Christmas tree differently. There's a ton of gifts underneath. While you know you have Santa Claus that's bringing gifts. I grew up in a Catholic culture. We celebrated Saint. Oh my gosh, I'm like Saint Nicholas. Yeah. Saint Nicholas. I was blanking out for a second. But that's like early in December, where we clean our boots and we put them on the window, and we get like a gift from Saint Nicholas. And so underneath our tree, maybe we'd get a gift as kids. We didn't really get gifts as like when we're starting to be older, but it was baby Jesus who brought the gifts. And we would have nativity scene.
Okay.
A nativity scene would be the most important scene underneath the Christmas tree. And so that was like a big difference. Here, I just saw a giant Christmas tree with a bunch of different decorations.
Right.
Oh, also, our Christmas trees always had one type of like a theme. Maybe it was a red theme this year, or maybe it was golden theme. And it wasn't like memories you have, you know. It was you just buy specific Christmas bulbs and like stuff like that. Yep. So basically, that was also like a different thing. And then for my first Christmas, my family surprised me. They arranged with my host mom to send me a gift underneath a tree from them.
Wow.
And so, that was really, really special. And
I'll bet it was.
So that was, interesting. And, Ivana and I, because we were staying with my host parents during the Christmas break for a couple of weeks, we cooked like Croatian food. We weren't good cooks. So kudos to my host mom for letting us even use her kitchen. But we made crepes, and we made this like really famous potato dish. So we shared in this way. And then in my junior year is when I met my now husband. He went to Hood College. Okay. And when I started going celebrating holidays with his side of the family, I always brought food. I would always record him saying Merry Christmas or Happy Easter in Croatian, and I would share that with my family.
Oh, that's wonderful.
They just they accepted all of me, and like with all of my grandeur. Right. When I come in, I'm really loud and like I take up space. So I have a wonderful family-in-law. Yeah. So.
Well, you even like talked about when we were kind of exploring the topic a little bit, you said something, and it sounds like for you, because you're an extrovert, maybe this is easier, but I imagine at times it's got to be hard, even though you're enjoying it. And so like one of the things you had mentioned, and so people should maybe be aware, when somebody's coming from another country, there's a lot they're taking in. And so one of the things I remember you saying was you were trying to do the best you could to be part of the crowd, right? And so one of the things I think you had mentioned, like you're trying to learn baseball terminology or something about baseball, because everybody talks about baseball. Right? I don't know what this baseball thing is, but everybody's talking about it, so I guess I should learn a few things about it so I can be part of this group. That's like one little thing. And so there's all these things kind of like that, right, that are going on in your brain all the time. You're trying to take these things in so you can be part of the people you're with.
Yeah, well, growing up, soccer was huge where I'm from. Soccer, handball, volleyball, skiing, those were water polo. Those were type of sports that were really, really huge, right? And I came here and everyone's talking about football. And then I was in college, there was lacrosse and like all these things. I was like, what is this? Yeah. This is weird. And so my friends, I got an amazing group of friends immediately who I met, and they were all Americans. And then I think there were maybe one or two international students as well with us. And so they would take me to high school football games and stuff like that. I did not understand the appeal at all, but I totally wore one of those college, I bought myself a college sweatshirt, not a sweatshirt, but
a jersey.
Basically
team jersey.
I was getting into it. I was like, this is so cool. And so, and then I did go to a Yankees versus Red Cross baseball game.
Red Sox, yeah.
It was really fun, but it was fun for me to take pictures more than seeing the game. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand the appeal, but I tried. And so it's just kind of interesting to do that. But, I did try to integrate that way. And I'm going to tell you this was really difficult for me to share my birthday with Thanksgiving, because I was born on November 24th. Oh, wow. November was always my month. Yeah. I grew up, that was my month.
Right.
Like, November 1st, we start celebrating me. And I came here, and everyone is like talking about Thanksgiving, decorating the Christmas tree.
Yeah, we're going to have the week off.
And I'm like, turkey? I'm competing with a turkey? like it's not, it's
kinda, I mean, it is a little bit, the fact is a turkey. I mean, come on.
And let me tell you something even more fun. When I met my husband, his nephew was born on November 24th.
Oh.
And that was like his favorite person.
Right.
So now I was competing for attention on the same exact day with the birthday of my nephew and Thanksgiving. Also, a cousin of hers, now my cousin-in-law, who just graduated high school and is going to college, and we're all excited. She also has the same birthday on the same day. So I went from being, treated like a queen to not having to share, it's very difficult for me.
Yeah.
but they, I learned about Thanksgiving. I learned about the, Christmas holidays and Easter and all that stuff. So we definitely have different customs when it comes to that. And my husband and I do half. So we bring Croatian customs. So maybe our tree is going to be decorated like in the U.S., which I really like, putting memories and stuff on the tree. But I limit the amount of gifts. My husband would buy the whole Walmart if he can for Christmas. So we limit that because I don't want it to be about the commercial part of it. So we try to limit the amount of gifts that we give, or at least the amount of money you can spend. That's number one. And then, for example, we cook a lot of Croatian meals. We cook a lot of versions of like American dishes, but I don't eat meat or like animal products. So we try to make it, plant-based.
Right.
So there's a lot of things that we try to mix and match there. But and then also we always have like a family call where we celebrate the Croatian version of Christmas. We sing Croatian songs, Catholic songs and that type of stuff. So that's definitely a part of it. And then I kind of, because thankfully it helps a little bit, there's a 6-hour time difference. So by the time the US wakes up, I've already celebrated Christmas with my family online, and now we go to celebrate American Christmas. It's kind of fun.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool.
That. Yeah.
So what was it like? You mentioned when you came here, part of your response was like, oh man, it's like I'm living in one of these episodes of one of these programs that I was watching on TV. So it sounds like you definitely had in your mind an ideal or a picture of what America was, and then you got here and lived here for a period of time. And so when you came here, how much of like what you thought America was solidified by living here, and how much of it maybe changed and you realized, well, it's not quite what I thought it would be?
Yeah, so Americans probably won't like this, but me being an American now as well, I can say this. But
these are the things that are interesting. We love to hear. So
I thought America is all like high, tall buildings, skyscrapers everywhere, no green land anywhere. And that was my first opinion. Fast food everywhere. Everyone eating McDonald's all the time.
Right.
I also thought people were extremely obese.
Yeah.
Like we have a perception of Americans as being extremely, extremely obese people.
Right.
Also, like just, definitely high tech, high advanced, really forward thinking people. But there's also, because I come from a really religious background, there was also a little bit of like, some of the stuff that America is pushing forward, like the religion might not agree with, or like the community that I grew up in, might not agree with and things like that. So that was also, there were different customs, like for example, Christmas is a little bit too commercialized for like where I come from, Christmas kind of here sometimes loses the importance of it, which is, hey, this is the birth of Jesus Christ, who's kind of a big deal in Christianity. And, you have that, but then all of a sudden here it's all about gifts and opening gifts in the morning, and, there's also like the big discussion when, Santa Claus is bringing gifts. So then you have a kid who is from a poor background who maybe gets one gift, and then and it's like, a new pair of jeans. And then you have another kid who is from a little bit of better background who got a new smartphone. And it's like, well, why does Santa Claus love you better than me, So it's like there's a lot of conversations there that have to happen in general about this. But that was my thinking of it.
Right.
And the moment I landed, it was completely changed, So, I also thought everything is like bigger, but I didn't think how actually big everything was, like when it comes to roads and cars and so we land in Dallas International Airport, which is in Virginia, and the drive from that Dallas airport to Frederick is very picturesque. There's trees all over the place. I love that road when there's no traffic. I love that road. It's so beautiful. And so I remember sitting in the front seat. My host mom picked me and my other friend with Ivana, who came with me that year to Hood College. She was also accepted and she came. We flew together and stuff. So we were picked up by my host mom, and she was going to drop us off at Hood College. And I just remember it was so hot. This was in August. It was humid. You couldn't breathe. Then we sit in this car, extremely AC'd, super cold. And then I remember just taking pictures because I couldn't believe, I just couldn't believe that how much grass there is around, how green it was. And I told my host mom, I was like, I thought it was all skyscrapers.
Yeah.
And she said, oh, you're thinking about big towns,
Right.
like, New York City, LA, Chicago.
Yeah.
She said, no, that's not everything. The
Right.
US is so big. So I think my big misconception was that the US was like this small space. And I think a lot of people still who haven't visited the US think about that. US is huge. Texas itself, I think, is the size of like half of Western Europe.
Yeah.
It's absolutely huge. So that was like a big, big surprise. Then my freshman roommate, took me to Walmart.
Yeah.
And I picked up a gallon of milk. I was like, what is this? Like, just imagine when I went to Costco. That was like, what are you preparing for? What are you preparing for? Is it the end of the world when you're buying these huge boxes of stuff? Like, there's just this abundance of stuff, just like stuff. And also, like, big surprise was customer service. Like, when I would buy a pair of shoes, and let's say I wore the shoes and maybe they broke, or maybe I brought them home and they were broken, I really couldn't return them. It was really difficult. The moment you bought them, you couldn't return them. Like, you don't really have that much like customer service.
Right.
Just that customers not always right. Customers like never right.
Right.
While here it's completely different. And I was so surprised that like I was wearing this one shoes and they didn't feel good. And I had a friend of mine that said, do you still have the original box and everything? And I was like, yeah. He's like, you can return it. And I said, what do you mean I can return it? And he said, yeah, you can return it and get a pair that actually fits you well. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, is this really true? So like the customer service is next level. Or like if you buy something and you bring it home and it breaks and it's not supposed to break, you go back and you return it and stuff. So it was just kind of interesting, but it also brings into this, this like, okay, well, we got abundance of things. We can just like use things once and throw it away. So that's what I loved about where I grew up, is because you couldn't really do that. You can afford to do that. You used everything to the very last minute, very, very last minute. So that was a big thing. Then I also saw that not everyone is obese. Yeah, obesity is a huge issue in the U.S. And but I also noticed there's a lot of people who are much more active in sports than I was. And I thought, I come from a really like athletically active country, and area in general. We have a lot of great athletes from the Balkan area in general. So. And when I say really good ones, I mean like number one in the world, like number two in the world, like really, really great athletes. So I was really surprised by that, seeing people running. I was really surprised with a lot of people, how many dogs they had and pets, and that, how much that was it. And then I'm going to tell you the story that just really going to explain basically my whole experience in the U.S.
Okay.
When I went to Walmart with my freshman roommate, she took me to. I came here with like a suitcase, I only could fit really my clothes. I went to get school supplies and some decorations for my room and bed sheets, things like that. So I went to Walmart and I'm at the cashier and I'm waiting and I'm talking to her and I'm like, oh my God, I forgot something. And the cashier's like, oh, just go get it real quick. It's right there in this aisle. And I look at the lady behind me. I was like, are you okay if I just go get this real quick? And she said, yeah, go ahead. I run. In the meantime, the lady that was behind me in the checkout is asking my roommate, hey, who is this? And like, where is she from? Because she heard my accent. She said, oh, she's Croatian. She just arrived in the U.S. She has nothing. Like, I didn't move into college yet, but I came to pick her up to take her because she doesn't have a car. So, she's buying a bunch of stuff. Not that she has nothing, but like she's buying a bunch of stuff for college and stuff. And like, she's really excited to be here. But yeah, she was just telling a little bit about the background. And like, she grew up in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And I come back and I'm like, oh, thank you so much for waiting. I told her, and I turned around and, it's time to check out. And this lady said, yeah, your roommate was just telling me you came here by yourself to go to college. And I was like, oh yeah, I'm so excited. It's so fun. Yeah. And I was like, look at Walmart. It's huge. And this lady just like, and I'm about to like, the checkout is getting ready. The last items are being checked out. And this lady says, you know what? Welcome to America. She takes her credit card and swipes.
Whoa.
And I don't know how much money it was. It was like $70, $80.
Right.
But it was still, I just stood there and I was like, what? Did you just pay for me? And she was like, yeah, I hope you have an amazing time in college.
Man.
I hope you, and if by any chance that person stumbles upon this video and you remember me, please reach out because I would love to take you out for dinner.
Yeah.
And like, just to tell you that one, act of kindness and a welcoming act was so wonderful, and introduced me to something that to pay it forward.
Yeah.
That's very popular in the U.S. I didn't know this. In our country, I do you a favor, you do me a favor.
Yeah.
But here it's like, you know what? Pay it forward.
Huh.
Pay it forward. And I've been doing that ever since that
wow.
time. And my host parents are huge in that. And like every time I spend time with them, they always talk about that. So I think those are some of the stuff. And I think that story really embodies the U.S. It's a very welcoming, very polite culture. And that stuff. So that was really surprising. It was surprising also how different it is. I traveled a lot around the U.S. and like everywhere where I went, it was different. But you have these.
You mean like culturally different?
Yeah. You have these like threads. I mean, of course, New York is going to be different than a tiny village. Somewhere. In the countryside in Maryland even. Right. But yeah. So I don't know. And also I was surprised a lot by the history of the U.S. because I didn't get a chance to learn a lot about the U.S. in school.
Right.
And so when I came here, that was like talking to people and everything. It was really great to learn about the history and learn about like a lot of different stuff. All those things. It was really fascinating.
Yeah, and this area is pretty rich in history too. So people, of course, come from all over. Even Frederick. There's a lot of cool history. But then, of course, proximity to D.C. There's a lot of cool things there as well. So did you ever have any doubts when you were here and you're like, did you ever think, I don't know if this is where I want to be, I don't know if this is where I'm supposed to be, or did you always because was it always kind of a forward moving, I know this is where I'm supposed to be, I just need to keep pressing on, or how'd that work for you? Yeah,
so really from the moment, I think Hood College was such a beautiful, beautiful place for me. It was such a perfect size because professors knew you by name. They would check in with you, ask how you're doing. I got involved immediately. Like my freshman year, I was involved in like 15 organizations. I just like wanted to expose myself to like everything.
Yeah.
And then slowly, like by my senior year, I was able to focus on what I really want. A big deal for me when I was in the U.S. is there's really abundance in the U.S., which I think a lot of Americans sometimes take for granted. Yeah. And I also think that abundance is not evenly spread out to all Americans and to all areas, of course. But with this like just abundance mentality, and like I love the mentality of the U.S., which is, the area that we just talked about in the Balkans, it's very complicated, and there's still a lot of political issues today. And one of the main reasons why millions and hundreds of thousands of young people leave every year is because of political issues. They think that they can't get stuff done because they either have to join a certain political party, or they need to be corrupted, or they need to use bribe or anything like that. And a lot of people don't want to deal with that. They want to go somewhere where there's some justice, there's not some movement forward, and there's not just like people in the government stealing money and building themselves like beach houses. It's like so I came here, and then what I saw like in my country was a lot you can do all these things, but why even bother, because you're gonna get because of the political situation, and like it's a post-war country. And I need to say, like, the way I felt about Europe was different before I moved to the U.S. We always, and I'm saying we, but it might not be true for everyone. I always felt like the Balkan area is the forgotten area. Oh. We never thought geographically we were part of Europe, but growing up we had this joke. One day when we're part of Europe, this is like, one day maybe we'll get to be a part of Europe. Maybe we'll be European one day too. It was so demeaning towards ourselves. Right. But it was also, tells you a little bit how the Western Europe, in my opinion, sometimes treats some other places, especially Eastern Europe.
And geographically, just so people maybe will get a sense, like you guys, your country borders the Adriatic Sea.
Yes.
And right across the Adriatic Sea is the kind of the calf of the boot of Italy, the back part of Italy. So just right across that sea is what we think of as Europe, right?
Yeah. So before in Europe, I kind of like sometimes, and I wouldn't be embarrassed, but like when you say you're from Germany, it was like, wow. Oh. But when you were saying like, Bosnia and Herzegovina or Croatia, it's like, oh, okay. But when I came to the U.S. and I was explaining to people where it is, they were like, oh my God, you're European? Yeah. And I was just like, I am European, and then, and I think,
wow, that's interesting.
Yeah. And I think it's really sad because like, the people of the Balkans shouldn't feel that they are less than. Yeah. they shouldn't feel like that.
Right.
But they feel like that because, of all the issues, and like, of course, the war has set us back. Like, the war doesn't end when it ends. The war is still ongoing in many ways. There's no more bloodshed, but, you have to politically and economically and just physically rebuild. Like, we've seen buildings that are still filled with bullet holes, and like a lot of empty buildings, villages being empty of immigrants who never came back. So it's like, this is like really, really important to think about. So that mentality, like, why bother? No one cares about us. No one cares about this area. Well, in the U.S., it was different.
Right.
And every single American I've met is like, yeah, I failed about it 300 times, but I'm going to get up and I'm going to try again. Like, and I'm like, wait, what? And it's like this, I'm never going to give up. And I think in America, it's also like this part, like, maybe your parents were poor, but in one generation, you can get yourself up to be not middle class, but rich. So it's like this, like, never give up. And we see this all the time with founders and people that are coming up with these new ideas and things, like people who had nothing and maybe were considered to be nothing, that just like rise to the top. So just like that sort of stuff is just interesting to me to notice. And like if Balkan people are watching this, and I'm an immigrant in the US, and I love the US, but I also love the Balkans. I love Croatia. I love Bosnia and Herzegovina. I visited Serbia. I love Serbia. It's so beautiful. Like, we have so much to offer. You don't have to go to the US. You don't have to go to Germany. You don't have to go anywhere to find that courage in you to try something new. And there's a lot of people that are starting entrepreneurial efforts in Bosnia and Herzegovina that I'm really proud of. Croatia is in the EU, so they are definitely faring much better than Bosnia or Serbia or other countries. But I want to tell them that they can also have this mentality of don't give up and try hard. Like, I was one of the Bosnians and Herzegovinians or Croatians that shouldn't have, maybe ended up in the US, but like, my family definitely did not have the financial ability to do that.
I think some of that is your personality too.
Yeah.
It sounds like, as you describe things, maybe you get from your dad, but you I think you had a line somewhat like that in your abbreviated biography that you posted in your Instagram post. And it was something about, something to the effect of, when troubles come or when a difficulty comes, I would just dream a bigger dream. And I thought, wow, even in America, not everybody's doing that. And so I think that's something that's pretty cool about you, that's just the way you think about things, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah, so I hope people will start thinking more about that too. And crises happen in life, they always will. Yeah. And I think when I started learning that challenges will continue to happen, I think is when I learned, well, I can either just be like, okay, I'm done, I'm just going to stay where I am right now, which was an unhappy place, that wasn't where I wanted to be, right? The reason why I went ahead with the challenge is because I thought there was something bigger and better or whatever. So, but it's also important to be satisfied where you are. I am a huge fan of James Clear, who you might know. He wrote the book Atomic Habits. He's amazing.
Oh, okay, I know that book.
I am obsessed with him, and I am obsessed with creating better habits. Yeah. So one thing that he always says is like, you can become better with your finances without hating the person you are right now. You can get better physically when exercising and working out and stuff without hating the person who you are now. Yeah. And I think that's really important to mention. If there's a lot of people out there who are like, hey, I really don't like where I'm in the space right now. Yeah, that's good. You acknowledge, okay, I am in a space where I'm not fulfilled. I'm not happy. I'm not doing what I should be doing. Let's spend some time by yourself, maybe doing something that brings you joy, whether it's just walking with your dog, cuddling with your dog, watching your favorite movie, cooking your favorite dish. It can be as simple as that, or starting a course and something that interests you. I think this is something that just is, now we have an abundance of resources. Yeah,
I mean, even with like what, this video is going to be posted on YouTube, it's amazing. I was talking with my stepson. I played drums when I was younger, and he plays a bunch of instruments now. But trying to describe to him, when I was a kid, you ordered a magazine, and the magazine would have this floppy piece of plastic in it that was a record. And you waited once a month, you'd get this record, you'd tear it out of the magazine, and that's how you would listen to some featured drummer. So once a month, you would get one drummer, you would listen to his one piece, it was like 8 minutes long, and that was it. And that was super exciting. And now YouTube is like, you just dial up the best drummers in the world, and they'll be telling you exactly how they do whatever they want to do. And so there's just so many opportunities. I mean, it's really, it seems like it's limitless, right? As far as pick a topic, pick a passion, pick something you're interested in, you can find so many resources. So.
Yeah, and I want to go back to the point you said. You probably have some of your dad's, side of this.
Yeah.
My dad is like a huge networker. He's really great with connecting with people. So I definitely get that from him.
So.
And sometimes I wish I was more like my mom. She's like,
in what way?
She is very, she is. Because she is so connected with God. She is very calm. She is able to like really deal with really difficult emotions in a certain way that I think a lot of people couldn't do.
Right.
And she is able, well, I don't know, they're both pretty good listeners actually, but I don't know, it's just like she's a little bit more, I would say, calmer when it comes to that type of stuff, and she enjoys and like listening to music and reading books and that type of stuff. While I see my dad, he really like, he gets energy from people, and that's like a a big part of being an extrovert is you get energy from people. But then he also, I definitely picked up both sides of him, but when I see this like networking aspect of me, that's definitely my dad's side. And that was a big part of his business, like his job as well, because he's leading the tourist branch of my little hometown. And it was really, he goes to a lot of fairs and all that stuff. So so it was really, really important to him to like trade shows, those types of things. Yep. So it's really important for him to network and meet new people and stuff like that. So he had to hone in those skills. So,
you're all about that. So,
yeah. But I wish I had a little bit more of the calm of my mom. She's able to like, when there's a situation where you just get really anxious and panicked and stuff, she's able to be like, okay, I'm going to go to my happy place. I'm going to pray. I'm going to think about this. And, then go from there.
Right. That's good quality to have. So
I don't think she could have gone through stuff and like taking care of the household and kids and stuff. We didn't really have nannies. We didn't have nannies. We didn't have grandparents that could help. So this was I'm really proud of her and my dad as well.
So what kind of brought on this conversation was you becoming a U.S. citizen, and so. Actually, one of the things I thought about as preparing for this, I don't even know anything about that process. And you obviously know a lot, everything maybe about that process. So I think a lot of people would be interested in how does that work? How do you become a U.S. citizen? Like, is it a bunch of tests? How long does it take? What was that process like for you?
I'm going to tell my side, my experience. Yeah. So the best is if you need to go through this process or, someone needs to go through it, is really to educate yourself as much as possible on USCIS site. This is the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, and also to check out YouTube videos. There are so many YouTube videos on this as well, where people tell their stories, and you also have officials who are making, who work in this field and who are making these types of videos. And that's actually how I prepared for my citizenship interview.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, because I wanted to see how it is. Like I wanted to, there's a lot riding on this process, and you don't want to mess it up. So the interviews where they were kind of like showing you how it'd be, it was really, really great. So I came into the U.S. on an F1 student visa, and a student visa is a visa that you obtain because you're going to do any type of studies in the U.S. Mine was to a 4-year college, and with a Croatian passport, I was able to get a visa for the whole 4 years. If I had a Bosnian passport, then you would have to get a renewal after 2 years. So that I just wanted to show that the difference a little bit in like citizenships and that type of stuff. So I came on an F1 student visa, and then when you come on that visa, you get this thing called CPT and OPT. CPT is working outside campus, including your internships, where you can work off campus legally, because when you come to the U.S., if you come as a student, you can't get a job at Starbucks. Like, it has to be connected to your studies, and you cannot work off campus. Okay. You can only work in F1 student visa approved jobs on campus. Okay. So I could do student jobs, but I couldn't do work study or anything else. We also couldn't get federal loans, obviously, because if you're an international student, you can't get federal loans. You're not a citizen. You can't do that. So what happened, and I didn't need them because I had a full scholarship, thankfully, but I thought that was important also to note. And so you can do CPT while you do internships. So I did actually internships while I was at Hood College. I did one with United Way of Frederick County, which is a great organization, and I loved working with them. And then after you graduate, you have the opportunity to extend your F1 visa, and you can extend it up to 1 to 3 years if you studied in the STEM field, because America wants to encourage people that are studying in STEM to come and work in the U.S. We, I guess, need a lot of STEM people here. You can extend it up to 3 years, where you get to stay on your F1 visa and you extend it so you can work in your field. I was studying business, which didn't count as a STEM major. I think now econ is actually counted as a STEM major. Math definitely is, but econ, even though it's part of business, it didn't count.
Oh, okay.
Business doesn't count as. So I extended my visa for 1 year. I mentioned I met my now husband, Paul, at Hood. He is local here. He is from Mount Airy, which is 20 minutes away from Frederick. So he was born and raised in Maryland. So a little bit different story than mine, and definitely not a Croatian like I thought. Maybe I'll marry one day a Croatian. He's a huge Croatian enthusiast, though. Sometimes I think he's a bigger Croatian than I am, honestly. So we met in college, and you probably know, but when we became serious pretty quickly. I just fell in love with him completely. He fell in love with me. He's a really good guy, and I hope I'm a good girl too. And so he was going to actually propose to me right before I graduated that Christmas, because I remember him asking for his family ring. This is from his grandma, the ring he asked for, and I remember hearing about this from his sister, and I came to him and I said, listen, I love you very much. I want to build a life with you. If you propose to me before I get a diploma here, I'm going to say no. I came here not to get a husband. I came to get an education. Wow. And I was like, so the moment I step off of that podium and I get the stage and get my diploma, you can propose to me. And he just started laughing. He's like, I just asked for the ring. I wasn't going to propose. So I know
you were dialed in. You had a goal in mind.
Yeah, I was serious, but I was like, I don't want to plan a wedding, and I don't want this to overshadow my education, all that stuff. So basically, I thought literally the moment I step off the stage, he is going to propose. He didn't. I got my first job. I worked in downtown Frederick for a startup. And I was really into the job. I wanted to prove myself. I absolutely love my boss, who I'm still in a great contact and relationship with, Austin Meyerman, and you know him. He's awesome. And shout out to the whole Talent CMO and Hunter Crown team. They're amazing. And so I was working with him, and I was really, really into it, and I totally forgot about the marriage part. Paul and I were dating. I lived in downtown Frederick with 2 roommates, and I was just having a great time. So I was getting kind of stressed out because there was a lot of, I worked for a startup, and you have to wear a lot of hats when you work for a startup, and I was working a lot. And he was telling me, he's like, you know what, I'm going to plan a trip for us so we can I'm going to plan a trip I went into my engagement story, and I was talking about immigration. But anyways, I'm going to do this real quick because it is important.
It's okay.
So he tells me, he's like, hey, I'm going to plan a trip for us so you can relax a little bit. He ends up, I didn't think any of it. He plans a trip to New York City because I mentioned to him multiple times how much I love Friends and New York City. Yeah. And he thought that's a great place to propose. So he actually proposed at Times Square at that trip.
Oh, did he really? Wow.
And so it was really great. We had a great time, and I obviously said yes. And so that would be kind of awkward. Like, he did all this. I said no. And I just went back to Croatia. I'm kidding. Yeah. And so he, and like when that happened, I was still on this OPT, and we're trying to figure it out, because, OPT has an expiration point. Yeah. And also, I was thinking of going back to do my master's. My goal was like to work for 1 year and then maybe go back to get my master's or do something like that. Because I thought I wasn't done with education. But the thing is, when you start getting a full-time paycheck, it's very difficult to go back to school and spend money. It's very difficult. Yeah. So, basically we're trying to figure out, like, how do we do this wedding? We don't have much money. We're kids. We're young. We want to get married. We knew we had to go through this huge immigration thing. And our anniversary is January 5th. So that was approaching kind of fast, and we're trying to figure out. And I was like, let's just do a wedding here. We'll do a small one. And then we realized, like, oh, but I want my parents here. And that was going to be just a few $1,000s just to get them here, which we didn't have. And whatever we had saved up, we knew we were going to need for the immigration process. Because some of the stuff that you do, like some of the documents that you have to submit, they cost like $2,000 just to submit them. And then if you make a mistake, mistake and they have to go back, you actually have to resubmit everything with the fee, so you don't get to correct it. And because I didn't know much about the process then, and I was really busy at work and stuff, we were going to get lawyers, and lawyers cost a lot of money. So long story short, we end up getting married, doing a small ceremony at the court. And by the way, we're not PDA people, so we never thought of having a huge wedding, because even just the thought of it was stressing us out so much. So we did a really small wedding here, and then we just started the process. And that process, we started, I think, in like February. Basically, because I was married to an American citizen, I was immediately submitting to get a green card. But you don't just get the green card like that. Because we just got married and our marriage was younger than 2 years, they had to prove, and this is like we had to prove that we are actually getting married because we love each other,
right?
And this is a truthful marriage. This is not.
There's been movies made about that plot.
Yes, exactly.
So,
so basically, and in the meantime, I met this amazing lawyer who was Croatian. He was of Croatian parents who worked in DC, and he agreed to help us out pro bono, which was a huge help.
Yeah.
And they were really wonderful, and they helped us out with all the paperwork, and we had to submit pictures of us together on trips with family. We even got letters of support from friends who knew us and family members, even college, even professors from college. Yeah. I think Reverend from Hood even wrote a letter of recommendation for letter of support that says, "Hey, I know this couple. It's actually true. They love each other, and they want to have babies and live a life together and build a life together." So we did that. And first, when you submit all the paperwork, there's a lot of paperwork you have to do. And when you submit all the paperwork, and on USCIS website, you're going to see what exactly you need. Because I was married to an American citizen, there was a specific process we had to follow. And then when they get all of you, it takes about 3 to 4 months for them to receive your paperwork and process it. And then they issue you a temporary work and travel authorization card. And that is something that if you need to go outside of the country and come back, you can come back in. Because you can't come in the U.S. if you don't have immigration paperwork to come in, if you don't have a visa or something that's telling them you can come in. And so I got that temporary work and travel authorization. So I switched from OPT and it went into like process for green card. And then it took about 10 months, I think, to get the actual green card. And the green card that I got was, and then that replaces your work authorization. You get rid of that. You don't need that anymore. And you get a green card. And then you also have to update your social security number or just to make sure that they know you're now a permanent resident. You are a green card holder. You weren't a permanent resident before. You were an immigrant that was allowed to be here on a specific visa. So now you're a permanent resident. And so I got my conditional green card. And the reason why I say it's conditional is because of the marriage being new and they want to ensure it's not a fake marriage, you need to be in that marriage for 2+ years. And after 2 years, you can apply to get your permanent green card. So so I had that conditional green card. I could work, do everything, travel, everything was fine. And then after 2 years, I applied to get my permanent green card. That process was actually significantly delayed because this happened, I think, right around COVID times, and USCIS offices shut down. And I actually searched, got our House representative from our district in Maryland. I actually reached out to their office, and they helped me push the process forward. Because my extension, when you first apply to get your conditional green card, conditions removed from your green card, you get a notification that says, hey, we are extending your green card for 1.5 years while we process all the documents, and you need to submit all the proof that you are together, all again, like pictures, bank statements. We submitted we lived together, so we submitted our rental agreement. Our bank statements had like both of our names on there, your internet bill, anything that's showing you lived together, and like you are building a life together. So that's what we did. And then I didn't hear from them for almost 1.5 years. And then the office, our House rep office helped us of our district. They just like reached out to because you couldn't reach out to the USCIS. Right. There was no customer service you could talk to. And they basically they reached out and said, hey, this is actually a straightforward thing. She's married to an American citizen. You are impacting her life right now by, not processing this quickly enough. And literally a week afterwards, I got a notification. Your conditions have been removed, and your permanent green card is on the way. And then after you get your permanent green card is when you can apply for your citizenship. Right. You generally need to be, from my understanding, at least a permanent resident for 5 full years in the U.S. So you need to be a permanent resident of the United States in order to apply for citizenship. because I'm married to an American citizen, I had to be only resident for 3 years.
Okay. Because
my application for the removal of conditions was delayed, I applied at my 4-year residence that I've been here. And I expect that it's going to take a while. But I didn't care at this point because I got my permanent green card. Yeah. I had all the rights except working for federal government, which is kind of interesting living in the D.C. area.
Yeah, exactly.
That, and I couldn't vote. But I had all the other rights, and I didn't really mind anymore because that was like the big hurdle to get the permanent green card. That was the most important part. And so then I submitted my application for my citizenship back in August. You have certain forms you need to fill out. There's a fee you need to submit. I don't remember the exact fees right now, but they are pretty expensive. Yeah. Some of them are like $500. Other ones are $1,600, $2,000. There's a lot of fees that goes with it. Yeah. And usually when you submit paperwork, the first communication you get from USCIS is biometrics. So they take scans of your eyes, they take your fingerprints, they take your picture to make sure they've got a record of you. And I don't know what else they use it for, but I believe it's for the record. And so that's what I assumed because I got my permanent green card last June. So about a year ago, I submitted my application last August. Okay. And because there was such a short amount of time between there, but I was waiting like a year and a half to get my permanent green card, I thought they were going to ask me to come back for biometrics. So in, I believe it was February or January, I get a notice in the mail that I'm invited to do the interview. But I thought it was biometrics appointment. Oh. So I first looked at it, I was like, oh, they're calling me for the biometrics when I first opened the mail. Yeah. And then later on, I went to read it in detail, and I was like, Paul, I got my citizenship interview. And he's like, I was like, I got to study. It's in a month. Like, oh my gosh. Or it was like in a couple of months or something like that. And then he was like, it's okay. Calm down.
You're like freaking out.
Yeah. I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know anything about the U.S. And he's like, yes, you know. And for the record, my husband works in politics, and he is huge in history. Okay. He is like kind of a nerd when it comes to history about the U.S. So he taught me a lot. We went to like travel to Philly, and basically he's like a tour guide. He knows everything. Just like an example. Yeah. And so to a lot of places where we go, he just knows a lot of interesting tidbits. And so, you know, in him working in politics and then us moving to DC is very politically charged. So even if you don't want to be a part of the politics, you are drawn into it. Yeah. So basically when I was studying, I was really surprised because when I first applied for the green card, I was like testing out the questions and stuff for the citizenship interview. But I didn't really know a lot. And now when I was testing myself again, I knew much more just because I was living and like with someone who's in politics. Yeah. And I was getting more involved because now I'm going to be a citizen. I need to be more informed about these things. And, you know, I live in DC. So the process for the citizenship, so you got to come from a green card in general, unless you were born in the U.S., which then you automatically get your citizenship and you're good. And then during the interview, my interview was going to consist of the major part was they go over your application and confirm the things that you have said there to make sure you haven't lied anything in your application. And then the second thing that they do is it's called a U.S. citizenship test or like an English test. You have to do it's a written, verbal, and also you need to know the history and politics of the United States. I practice from the USCIS website. They also have an app where you can practice. And I actually, if someone's watching this and is interested in this, I encourage them to check it out because
it's great that they have these resources.
Fun. Yes, it's so fun.
You say it's fun?
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, it's like a game.
Yeah.
It's like a
so
game.
They do try to make it.
Oh yeah. They make it really fun. The app is really interesting, and it made me feel empowered. You know, when you learn about like the history of the place you're at, you are more empowered to know how to make better decisions tomorrow, and just like you know more. Like when you know the composition of the U.S. Constitution and what it's meant to do, and the U.S. government, you feel more empowered to know. Like when there is, you know, something in news, you know how to how to react because just like knowing knowing all these details about it. So what we did is I studied from the sheet and I did the test. I self-tested in the app, and I also had my husband question me, and he was actually getting annoyed because I told you I'm all about habits. So I said that every single day I would study for 15 minutes. I learned it pretty quickly. So I would ask my husband to ask me a question, and he would be like, you know all the answers. You don't need to study. But I was like, these are the type of questions you can forget very easily, especially, you know, I don't know. There was a lot of questions about, now you see, you like forget these things, but there were easy questions like, who fought in the Civil War. That's like an easy question. But then there's also like, who wrote the Declaration of Independence, and when was the Declaration of Independence signed or written? And then there was, where was Constitution signed? When was it signed? Like there's a lot of these questions where like, this year, that year, like you stop for a second and ask. Then it was like, what is a given right to all Americans? And then you have multiple like things that you can answer and stuff like that. So there's there's a lot of questions when it comes to that. And then for example, like how many members does the House have? Like what is Congress? Like what does constitute Congress? So you have to like know there's the Senate, there's the House. How many members does the Senate have? How many terms? For how many years is the senator elected? How many years is the House? What about the White House? How many branches are in the U.S. government? So there's a lot of this.
Of detail.
Yes, a lot of these questions, which you might think it's like, oh, everyone knows this, but it's.
No, there were a few in there. I'm like,
I'd
have to study up for a couple of those.
Yes, yeah, and so they also like ask like some of the questions that were pretty easy were like, what ocean is on the East Coast? What ocean is on the West Coast? Stuff like that. Yeah. And so I went to the interview. You have to bring the paperwork, your original application, and any supporting documents. So I did that, and then basically all of the officers I met so far, the USCIS, were really wonderful. I had that done, and then they say, okay, great. I'm going to recommend that your application be approved. We're going to be in touch. So they don't say congratulations, you're going to be an American citizen. They say we're going to check this just in case something came up in the interview that they need to double check. Oh,
really?
Yeah, because you might have said on your application, hey, I'm married, but in the meantime you got divorced, and now you got a lot of questions. And you might have said something in your application, then you didn't bring supporting documents, so they need to like ask that stuff. So basically, then after that, I got an invitation, and basically I just got it in the mail. We were invited to your ceremony, your swearing ceremony. And unfortunately, it was still COVID, so we couldn't bring guests. But my mother-in-law was so excited, and she's like, I'm coming, and I'm just going to be in front of the building. So my mother-in-law came, my husband, and my little dog, and they were waiting for me outside. And we did the swearing ceremony, and the coat that you saw in the pictures is actually my mom's coat.
Oh, really?
That I re-upcycled it, and I had a tailor it because it was a little puffy because it was from the 90s. It wasn't from the war, but it was from the 90s. So I wanted to wear a piece of something that reminds me of like who I am and my family. So I wore that coat that day, and I just remember coming out and I got my naturalization certificate, and I come out and basically, and the officer was also wonderful too. There were about I think 20 of us that day getting naturalized, and so from all over the world, like from all over the place. It was a group naturalization ceremony, and so I stepped out and I was trying to look where they are, and I saw my little dog walking and my husband coming, and I just yelled to her, Zoe, your mommy is an American citizen. And she's just like, she was getting excited because she saw me. And then the officer who did the ceremony was like just smiling. He's like, this is so cute. So it was really beautiful. Oh, wow. And so that was the ceremony. And
it's like a huge process.
Yes.
Describing all those things, I'm like, I had no idea it was. I thought it was going to be, as that you would describe it, and it would be difficult and long. But that was way more than what I thought it would be. Yeah,
it was 5.5 years. Yeah. So from my student visas and like my OPT, and from the moment we submitted our application after I got married. And by the way, the marriage way to obtain citizenship is like probably one of the easiest ways, and it's still so complicated because they want to ensure you're doing this because you want to be an American citizen. You're not trying to just get citizenship.
So it takes tons of time. You described there, money.
Yes.
Maybe legal counsel sounds like it would be really helpful. And focus. Yes. And like you got to navigate this whole system of paperwork and people and processes. So it's a lot.
Yes. Yeah. And you can miss important dates. If you miss your day, they see it as your application being abandoned. So you need to reapply again. Like you have to be really on top of your game. Yeah.
So I'm going to shift a little bit to just some kind of like bigger perspective questions and things that I'm curious because you have a perspective that is very interesting, and I don't know who said this originally, but there's a problem if you want to ask a fish, hey fish, what is it like to be wet? A fish doesn't know because a fish just swims in.
Yeah.
It's always in water, so it doesn't know what it even means to be wet, right? So being an American and growing up here, there's probably things that I don't know about that are really interesting, and that's part of what you're providing is this perspective, because you now have the perspective of being here and really understanding America, but also from the outside a little bit looking in and being able to tell us some things. But you've already shared some of those things, so that's really awesome. But one of the things that I was thinking about, and you, I think, embody this in a lot of ways, there's something about the American story that is integral to the immigrant story. And so I was thinking about that a little bit as in preparation for talking with you. And one of the things that was interesting that came up, and this wasn't me doing a lot of digging. This was a couple of these I looked up, but most of these I just thought of off the top of my head of people who came here, who contributed something to what really is like an integral fabric of America, right? And so I'm just going to name a few of these because I just thought this was amazing. So if you look at science and technology, the one guy that I thought of is actually from Croatia, Nikola Tesla. So electricity, Elon Musk, Sergey Brin, who's co-founder of Google, Andy Grove, who's the CEO of Intel. So you look at science and technology, and Andy Grove is actually born in Hungary, and he came here. If you want to go to like industry, you got Carnegie. Andrew Carnegie was steel and railroads. Henry Ford was a first generation American, but his dad was from Ireland. Chevy was founded by Louis Joseph Chevrolet, who was from Switzerland. Like those are like American brands, right? And then you go to entertainment and culture. This is pretty interesting. If you're having a beer, you might be having something from Anheuser-Busch. Adolphus Busch, came here, I think from Germany. Heinz, Heinz ketchup. The founder, Henry J. Heinz, he was born in the United States to German immigrants. Van Halen is not from the U.S. They're from Belgium, I think. Yeah. And Arnold Schwarzenegger. No, wait, I'm going to get that wrong. Somebody will correct me on that one. Arnold Schwarzenegger, Levi Strauss, like all those things are like iconic American things that came because people came here from another country, and then they brought about this spirit of like creativity. So when you hear all those things, do you have any sense of that? Like I think, getting to know you even before this and then, talking through this story, I think you have that energy and that sense of creativity. Are you aware of that? And what do you think about that?
Well, I do think definitely that I wouldn't come to where I am today without that energy and creativity and excitement. Yeah. But some of the stuff that I really noticed about the U.S. is the U.S. is not afraid to risk stuff. And this might be, every time I talk to an American.
So let me just ask you, when you say that, so you feel like it's not that nobody is like that in other places, but you feel like the overall, like this push in America is like, let's not be afraid. Let's be willing to take risks.
Yes.
And
yes.
That's kind of how
I
see it. I don't think of us as that necessarily. I'm not saying we're not, but it's just interesting to hear that then. Like you see that coming in, you're like, man, this is part of what America's about.
Yeah. Well, here's kind of how I see it.
Yeah.
No one is cheering and saying, "Oh, I can't wait for our country to be the next Hong Kong." No one's cheering that. No one wants China to take them underneath their wing. And China is like, they're doing great economically.
Right.
They're like, the U.S. actually depends on a lot of stuff that's being created in China with supply chains and everything. Yeah. Like we depend on China.
Right.
Still, no one's here. No, I've never heard a country or people proclaiming, I cannot wait for China to come and move my economy forward. No one's saying that. And I wonder, why do people see United States in that way? And, the U.S. has issues. I'm not saying it's a perfect country. There's no way it's a perfect country. There's a lot, I am really, really passionate about, for example, food. I think the food system in the U.S. is absolutely broken. And I think the people, the quality of life of that, go, get coffee to go, get your fast food to go, just everything to go. I think it's like a disconnection from who we are as human beings. We should cook together and enjoy food together and really enjoy the fruits of our labor when it comes to cooking. But then it's also a country where a lot of people can afford to go out and eat. That just wasn't something that we did because we really couldn't afford eating out. Like that's why I cooked at home. Like I would have loved to eat takeout, but that wasn't just something that we did. So for example, like I'm really passionate about that stuff. So I just want to say, like, preface it that the U.S. is not like a perfect country.
Right.
But, you read about all these investors and stuff, and like they've lost at times millions of dollars. Some of them have bankrupted completely. I mean, Elon Musk almost bankrupted twice in his lifetime of trying to bring Tesla to be mainstream. And, think about it. He's been working on this for a really, really long time. And so it's just, there needs to, and like I'm reading a book right now about Steve Jobs. He is a fascinating persona, and I'm only halfway through, so I don't know what else I'm gonna discover about him. But like I didn't know how arrogant he was, like at first, and why he was kicked out of Apple because he was so difficult to work with. But the reason why Apple succeeded is because he just had such a vision that he would not let go of. And I think that kind of the boldness, the confidence, this like push forward is really what, like, to me makes the U.S. different than other countries, because like and I don't know, maybe it's the regimes that the Balkans was under. I sometimes feel like people are really afraid, and people are, but it could also be that maybe they're not afraid. They're just grateful that there's no bloodshed happening in the streets. Yeah. If you think about the U.S., the last
your
war,
baseline.
Yeah, the last
different.
war that was here was in 1800s, right? Yeah, that was the last war that was here. So it's like you can't really, like, you have parents who've been in wars and grandparents, but those were overseas wars. There was no war. The closest thing that happened was 9/11 here, where you felt attacked on the actual U.S. soil. So I think this like really is something that
we
needs
grow
to be
up
thought of.
with a sense of, like, our foundation. And again, like you said, there are some significant exceptions, but like 9/11 was an exception, but it didn't fundamentally change everyone's cultural baseline of we are safe and free and we can live from that. Yes. Right. And that didn't come for free, but it was there. And that's a different baseline to live from than like how you described where you came from and growing up there and having multiple wars at different times and having multiple generations of family, who are not there anymore because of that war. So, and it's I think the countries, like that area, still is discovering themselves and recovering from the war, that they don't have time to think about other things. And now we have a lot of youth leaving that area, which is another issue. You don't have who's gonna keep the tradition going, who's gonna live in these places when we leave. All these things are just they're happening, and they're not like people leaving like me, who went here for college, spent 10 years here in my formative years, fell in love with an American. Like for me, it's a little bit different. If I fell in love with a Croatian or someone who lives in Europe, maybe I would have lived in Europe now, but like it's a little bit different. Now we got family in Europe and here, and it's I'm choosing to live here and to raise my kids for now here, but I would definitely love to go every summer to Croatia and to show them also Croatia and also Bosnia and Herzegovina. I want to make sure they speak Croatian. I want to make sure they know Croatian customs and everything. Like I don't want them to be Americanized to the point where they don't know who they are, and I think it's really important to know where you come from. And Americans are usually my husband, he's of Irish descent, UK descent, and Dutch descent. I think that's really important for him to know, and it's important for him to go to those areas and learn about even though he's been here for a few generations, like it's important to know where you come from. So I think it's that, like the grit, really, the American grit. I feel like sometimes like my people where I come from are more survival based, and here a lot of people are like, the fulfillment. What's next? What does my soul crave? And it's really easy to go for the fulfillment when you have options. When the only jobs provided in your community are so low that you have to go to Germany to work and to see your kids twice or three times a year, that's a different situation, and that's what a lot of fathers had to do after the war, because there was no jobs in Bosnia. So I think, or in the Balkan area. So I think that's kind of the perspective that I see. And I just feel like excited here. Like I have my own business and I work full time for a company.
I'm encouraged to have
Right.
my own business. Like, I'm always learning new things. I'm encouraged to do this here. And I know now with the new internet generation, it's probably happening everywhere in the
Right.
world, but it's I just feel this like enormous pull forward. And in the US, it's kind of difficult to give up in a sense. Like there's always someone who's going to be like, hey, I can lift you up. Come on. I just think I don't blame the people
Right.
in my country or anything. I think there's a lot of really bright people. And I'm actually, I haven't been there I haven't lived there. I go and visit there, but I haven't lived there in 10 years. And whenever I come back, I'm always blown away with young people and with older people who are trying new things and doing stuff. There's new little tourist places and restaurants opening up. We have now a rowing team that goes and competes,
cool.
So there's stuff happening. But I do think that in the U.S., it's like, definitely that never give up mentality, and there's always resources.
Yeah.
While the Bosniaks, Croatians, and Serbians know there is a time when there's no resources. They know the time when there was no abundance and stuff. And maybe that fear kind of lives in us.
Yeah, I was saying there's probably a lack of confidence or, that could there's a feeling like that could happen again. We could be back there, right?
Yeah,
it's
because
not
it's
at all
not
out
resolved.
of the question, right?
Yeah, it's
right.
not resolved yet,
Right.
So, and I don't. We didn't talk about this at the beginning, but Bosnia and Herzegovina is actually, there's two entities within Bosnia and Herzegovina. There's Republika Srpska, which is the Republic of Serbia, which is not to be confused with Serbia, the country. So this is Republika Srpska, that's the Serbian area, mostly majority Serbian area in Bosnia and Herzegovina. And then there's the Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which includes the Bosniak, Muslim, and Croatian areas of the country. So even within the country, there's basically two mini countries, two like basically autonomous places in a sense. So it's kind of like, it's very, very complicated. It's not like an easy issue to resolve. And I just hope that our leaders there and in the world and people all over the world and who are from there will understand, and people who live there, that to try to do our best to live in peace and unity, and try to focus on building the country and enjoying the fruits of the country, because it's beautiful. Bosnia is beautiful. Croatia is beautiful. Like those areas there are so gorgeous. It's just.
Well, it sounds like maybe you're balancing this great. I don't know, but because you're talking about. You've talked a lot about obviously what you love about America, being an American, but you still have a lot of loves, that are still there, both familial and cultural. In your homeland. Well, I don't know if would you call it your homeland? Bosnia, Herzegovina.
Yeah. I consider both Bosnia and Herzegovina and Croatia my homeland.
Yeah. So what's the hardest thing about living? I mean, there's a lot of joys, I'm sure, but what's the hard thing about that for you right now?
It's hard for me I'm really impatient.
Oh, okay.
I want to have $1 million so I can use that dollars, help the community in the U.S., whichever community I pick, and go and help the community in Bosnia and Herzegovina too. That's who I am. Yeah. I just want to figure out resources to use and help people.
Right.
And so I'm really impatient. I know I'm really young. I still have plenty of time to start new businesses, to get rich if that's like really in the stars for me, and that type of stuff. But like, it's just really like, I just want to help people, and I want to tell them that they don't have to leave a certain area in order to like start their dreams, especially nowadays with the internet. Right. And Corona, this whole like COVID coronavirus crisis has really helped us to understand how we can work remotely. We can still connect. Yep. We can reach resources. So maybe this is going to help people to just like step a little bit aside when it comes to these things. But I am a really, really proud Croatian, and I'm a really proud American. Like, I have spent 19 years in the Balkans. I've spent 10 years here. All of those are really formative years. I came here in college. Like, you're still like, your brain is not still like fully formed until you're like 25. So it's like, I'm still forming. I'm young. I'm like, obviously my husband and his family have a big influence on me as well, because they are now my family. And, all of these things are, his upbringing, my upbringing, they all collide together. And I'm sure one day, if we're lucky to have and blessed to have kids, we are going to, instill this in our kids. But it's really important for me to know who I am and keep
Yeah.
that in me.
Yeah.
And like if I start forgetting some of the cultural stuff, I do tell my parents, you need to warn me
Yeah.
and I need to remember these things. Like I cannot forget, because it's
Well,
easy to forget it here.
I'm sure it makes them very, very happy to know that that's important to
Yes.
you.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I'm sure that makes them
Well,
smile.
I immediately
so.
learned how to make the foods and stuff
Yeah.
here. There's this really famous food called pita, which is a dough you fill it like a dough basically with like either meat or veggies or something.
Yeah.
And so I learned how to make. It's a really complicated meal to make, and I learned how
is
to
it?
make that. And my parents were so proud because it's like she won't forget. I'm like, no, don't worry, I won't
Oh,
forget.
that's awesome.
So, yeah.
So if there were an immigrant, I hope there are, listening to this today who are here in the U.S. and they're struggling to make this their new home, or maybe they're missing home, whatever it is, they're having a struggle. What would you say to them?
I would say that it's okay to miss your home.
Mm-hmm.
I get super nostalgic. Then I go to Europe for a few weeks, and then I get super nostalgic about the U.S.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
Basically, as immigrants, we have our heart in multiple places. And that's very, very difficult. You left a piece of your heart is always going to be in your homeland, and a piece of your heart is going to be in the country you chose as your home now.
Yeah.
And we got to learn how to live with that. And we have to understand that it's okay to miss our homes. But one thing that I love about the U.S. is that there are so many places where you can try to find a community. Like using D.C. as an example, you have that embassy row where you have a bunch of embassies from all over the place, and the embassies usually have open houses and open door policies and things like that. Maybe a little bit different now with COVID, but they're probably reopening now and stuff. But that would be a great way to connect back and reach out. Also reaching out to your embassy to say, hey, do you know a local community, like a Croatian community or someone that I could connect with? Googling Croatian communities around me, Croatian church, Catholic church, or however you grew up. And I'm using, my, kind of labels as I grew up. But this is kind of like a way to reach out to people that are like-minded or maybe that remind you of your culture. Another thing can be, which I do, is I cook food that I grew up on, and then I, invite all my American friends and I teach them about it.
That's awesome.
And seeing them eat, my favorite dishes, and they're asking me for recipes, and they're like, how can we make this? This is so good. How can we make this? This is so cool. And me sharing the stories about it. That's another way to keep my tradition alive.
Right.
And another thing that I'm going to say, which also is something that I'm learning as an adult now, that it's okay to cry.
Yeah.
If you are missing your home and you want to cry and there's no one around you to give you a hug, please just go to online and just say, I just need a hug right now. Hug yourself, give yourself a hug. I was really famous at Hood. I was giving hugs to everyone. I was like a hug person. And COVID was difficult for me because that I couldn't reach out to my people. But I get nostalgic, and I tell my husband I'm really nostalgic about these things, and he's like, it's okay. Do you want to listen to Croatian music? Do you want to listen to Balkan music in general? Do you want us to go? There's a Balkan shop in Alexandria, Virginia that's really close to us, so we go there, like a store, it's called Euro Store, and you can buy candy and stuff you grew up on. There's also there's a small community of Croatians and ex-Yugoslavia basically people in Alexandria, so there's also a restaurant there.
I was going to ask if there are any restaurants around.
Croatians
you have to share that with me.
I'm taking you there.
I'm
taking you there.
Okay.
So you have to come because it's so close to where we live. I'm going to take you there, and you really get a taste of the culture.
Trying different kinds of food, so that sounds exciting.
Great. So, and so are you a wine person or? So Croatia is really famous when it comes to wines, and especially
I've heard that.
The Herzegovina part.
Okay.
That's not Croatia, but that area is really famous too. But then they have Croatian wines there. That's one of the stuff that usually when I go to people who I know who love to drink wine, I was like, I'm gonna get you a Croatian wine so you can try it, and it's really good. So that's kind of just trying to connect on that level.
Right.
And there's this couple of dances that are our national dances that I love to do, and I just listen to these songs. They're folk songs, and I love that. If I'm really nostalgic about it.
So do you just grab your husband, pull him off the couch, and start?
You know what? Because I work remotely and I'm home alone, during the day when he doesn't work remotely. It's I just sometimes grab my dog or I just dance in front of my dog and Zoe is
because you have a little dog, right? So
you
just
she's
pick her up and
she's
dance around with her.
15 pounds, but so that's kind of how I do it. And at Hood, I had a community. We had Balkan nights. We would organize Balkan nights when we were nostalgic.
Cool. Yeah.
So we would invite our American friends. But honestly, my biggest way of curing nostalgia was always sharing the culture with someone else.
That's a really helpful tip. Hopefully,
Yes.
I think it will be for people, because I don't know that
Yes.
someone would necessarily think that. So that's great
Yes.
that's
Yes.
a helpful thing to share it with people. Because I think I would assume now you're an extrovert, but people, especially if they're more introverted or less extrovert than you, and they're an immigrant, they're probably going to tend to think, well, people probably don't want to know about where I came from. And actually, most of the time, the opposite is true. People are fascinated with that. I am. I mean, a lot of people that I know are like super interested in hearing about where you came from, and what was the meal like? What kind of dances? What kind of music did you listen to? So, don't assume that people don't want to know. Actually, it's probably the opposite. People are very interested in those things. So
everyone who hears an act, I was a little bit self-conscious at first because of my accent when I moved to the U.S. And then I realized that it's a great conversation starter, because people are like, oh, where is your accent from?
Right.
And then I tell them where it's from, and then they start asking me questions, or maybe they've been to Croatia, or they've been to the Balkan area, or maybe they've heard about the war, and then they start asking me questions. And I'm really open about it, so I like to talk about it. And for introverts, what I say is, if you are introverted, find an extrovert friend who's going to take you everywhere.
There you go.
I have so many introverted friends.
That's
and
a great idea.
My husband is an introvert.
Yeah.
I take him everywhere.
Yeah.
And when I know he doesn't feel comfortable to go, I'm going to go by myself.
Right.
But and this is kind of a joke, of course, but the reason why I love the U.S. so much, and it hasn't been great all the time. I've run into challenges being in the U.S. as well. It hasn't been all so cute and wonderful. Of course there's always challenges, just applying for internships and applying for jobs and all that stuff. That was challenging, of course. And finding apartments and doing all that research, credit scores. I knew nothing about credit scores, before all these things, before I had to learn about these stuff. So I think it's just, really being okay with reaching out and testing the waters. If you start talking to someone, you start talking about your country, and they're kind of if they're rude or something, well, you don't even want to be friends with that person if that person is not receptive. People who really want to be friends with you, they want to learn about your background.
Yep.
And what I also tell people, if you are an introvert or an extrovert, extroverts tend to talk a lot like I am.
Right.
I make sure to ask questions as well. And this is something I had to learn in my networking. My job, when I started working full time, a big part of it was networking. And I had to learn when to shut up and when to ask questions.
Right.
And it's really difficult to do that. But when you do it, it's really fun because you get to learn a lot about people. So I learned a lot about people in Frederick. And I will say something about Americans, which I've noticed. When they meet someone from a foreign country, that's not Canada. Canada is kind of
doesn't count.
Just kidding, to Canadians. But when you are from a foreign country, they meet you and they're like, oh my gosh, you are from France. I'm just from the U.S. No, don't say it with that. Say it with be proud of it and be happy. And it's just I think people are really lucky who are born in the U.S. I mean, there's so many immigrants every year that want to come into this country. Cherish that and be willing to share this and tell people, especially those Hollywood dominates this. This microphone has been attacked by me multiple times in this conversation.
It's all right.
Used
to it.
Yeah. Hollywood dominates the movie and TV shows industry, so it's highly likely a person who you're meeting from a different country has learned about the U.S. through the lens of that. Introduce them to other stuff. Yeah. My favorite thing was
that's good. That's a good tip.
Yeah, my favorite thing was Americans inviting me home for dinner or inviting me to stay with them during Thanksgiving. Don't be afraid to do that, and also share about your culture. I remember my first Thanksgiving. The family that invited me, they live in New Jersey, so they took me for my birthday to New York. For dinner. They also took me to see the Rockettes.
Oh, and
wow. The Allen family, they're wonderful. I absolutely love that family, and they're so wonderful. And so then we had a Thanksgiving dinner at their house, and then we decorated a Christmas tree, because that's a custom here in the U.S. When you decorate your Christmas tree on Thanksgiving, we do it on Christmas Eve. Yes, on the 24th. So it's a complete different custom. So I got to decorate Christmas tree with them, and that's a memory that's going to be forever ingrained in my brain.
That's cool.
And my host parents were really a big part of also teaching us about customs in the U.S. as well. So don't be ashamed of your culture, no matter where you're from. Yeah. It's very, very beautiful to learn about that and share about all those things.
Those were all really interesting, and hopefully, like I said, they'll be helpful to somebody listening. So I appreciate that. So how about for you, like your future? You got any exciting plans? Anything interesting going on?
One thing we didn't get to talk about because there's so many other topics, and we were like, oh, we're probably going to fit this under an hour. I don't know how long we've been here, but it's been a while. So you're a really good interviewer. and you got someone who can talk a lot. I should write a book. That's what I should do.
I think, you should start keeping some notes.
Yeah, so I've always been creative. And this is like, I've always written poems. I've written like short stories. So I really think I should be a writer.
You've written poems and short stories.
Yes.
Okay, I didn't know this. That's super interesting.
I don't share that part of me because I think...
Do you share your poems with anybody?
No, my husband is really... Like, I've written a couple of poems that were maybe read somewhere, but I didn't really... a lot of them is, because when you're usually like the happy, personal time and smiley and stuff, you sometimes don't want people to see other emotions.
Sure.
And like, I'm now like learning to accept, I'm a human being of many emotions. Yeah. And so a lot of those emotions I express in my poems. Yeah. And so it's kind of a way for me to digest at the end of the day.
Yeah. So they're very personal sometimes.
They're personal. Yeah. Sometimes it's like the books, I'm a huge book reader and listener. So if I listen to something, there was a book that I read that there was a lot about arranged marriages, and they're pretty popular from Middle East, and like how this lady came to New York City and was so excited and just like they had no freedom at all. Mm-hmm. And like I had a poem inspired by that, and like she was abused in the marriage and stuff like that. So I get like inspired by certain things, or maybe I see something in the news, I get inspired by it. So but it's my way to digest at the end of the day. And so maybe one day I'll share that when I get a little bit more courage to do that, because you get as an artist, you get I mean, in general, people slame you, like, and there's always going to be someone who's going to criticize. Someone might see this interview and think it's the worst interview in the world. So you're always going to find at least one person who doesn't like it. And I think it's really important to learn to do that. But when you're sharing something really personal to you, like, it's very difficult to learn negative stuff about it. But I really do think myself one day in a writing career. I don't know what capacity, but maybe that. Maybe I'm going to start a blog. Maybe I'll do a YouTube channel that kind of has me writing scripts and then talking about it and stuff. But right now I'm in the digital media. I have a business where I do website design. I do a lot of work with local business owners, and some of them are from Frederick, and I met them during my time when I lived here, and I absolutely love working with them because it's it's like a one-on-one. You work a lot with founders, with a lot of times with a sole proprietor, like they're the only ones that are in the business, doing the business and doing all the work, and it's really fascinating. So I love doing that. I would love to keep that going, maybe as a side business, maybe as a full-time business. I don't know. I also do email and social media strategies, and I work for a financial company where I do their organic social media. It's a really fascinating medium to see how people are using to connect, to share their knowledge. So I do really enjoy that. Just like learning that. I noticed though that a lot of social media managers, they manage social media during the day and that they don't want to touch their own social media. So a part of me is kind of saying like, I wish I didn't do this full time so I can try to build my own stuff on the side or like full time. But maybe one day something like that will happen. I don't know. I'm really interested in nutrition and, food and that type of stuff. I'm also interested in real estate. So maybe a real estate agent one day, either on a side or as a full-time. I don't know. There's a lot of stuff. Yeah,
it doesn't sound like you lack options there. A lot of things you're thinking about.
No, so. I also would love to, honestly, if it's possible one day, I would love to stay at home with kids for a few years, especially when they're young. Because when my mom and dad talk about, like, my dad had an option to go to Germany after the war and work there and see us only a couple of times a year. He didn't want to do it because he wanted to see us, and thankfully he got opportunities within our town. So he was home every single day. We were so lucky to have a dad who was home every single day and really involved with us and everything. So I want, I don't want to just give my kid to a daycare. Right. I would love to be able to do that, but with inflation and everything, I don't know how much
changing.
Possible that will be. But that would be something wonderful. I also really passionate about animals because I do try to live as vegan as possible and not to use animal products and stuff. It's very difficult in today's world to do that. But I would love to have a sanctuary farm one day and maybe have animals that we rescue. Definitely a lot of dogs. Right now we live in an apartment, so we can't have that many dogs. But I would love to to do that. So there's a lot of stuff here. My husband is really into politics, but what he does is video editing and graphic design.
Okay.
So I think maybe like if one day he starts his own business doing that stuff, we could maybe move somewhere where it's like a farmland that we can do something like that. Maybe I can live my writer, mom, slash farmer, sanctuary farmer.
Put a couple of those things together.
But maybe that's something that we can do. Maybe we're gonna move to Croatia and just live there.
So,
I don't know.
So what I hear is you still have dreams.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
And you still have more dreams to pursue, which is awesome. Yeah. That's great.
Yeah. A lot of them.
Okay. So it'll be fun hearing this. You've spent, how many years were you in Frederick altogether?
From 2012 until 2021, so 11.
Oh,
no,
okay.
11 years, yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. So
I've been in DC only for a year.
Yeah, you just moved over there. So okay, haven't been here for a while. You have any like favorite places to eat or what,
Yeah, we used to live in downtown Frederick. Our favorite place to go was Beans and Bagels. We were right on that street.
Yeah.
We absolutely loved it.
Yep.
Cafe Nola was amazing. Yeah. I mean, it's just such a cool, like hippie, place to be at.
Yeah, it is great.
We did also, one of our favorite places to go get food was the Orchard.
Yep.
I also love Silver Diner. That's not in downtown Frederick, but Silver Diner has an amazing menu, literally for any diet you can think of.
I know, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah. And my favorite is their mango soy shake. If you've not tried it, you must try it. It's so good.
All right. It sounds pretty cool.
Yeah, I love that. My husband's favorite is Pop Shop. Have you been there?
Oh yeah, that place is so cool.
So that's something he had to teach me about American history. I didn't know like pop shops and soda shops and that type of stuff.
Right.
I didn't know how big of a deal that was. And so he introduced me to that. I'm not a soda fan at all, but I like shops like that.
Yeah, and it's a huge nostalgia thing, right? Because you go in there and there's always things from when you were a kid.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think there was one also with like the communist like sign or something like it was like
probably
really
from the 80s.
Yes, yeah. It was it was interesting like that we were seeing that and we were kind of like, and like a Lenin lemonade, but Lenin something like that. Like it was a play on that type of stuff. So root beer, for example, is not something I had any idea that exists. And like he introduced me to root beer, which is not a real beer.
Yeah.
It's like
have you had birch beer?
No. Is it better than root beer?
I mean, it's just different. I like it more than root beer, but it's just different. But
I'm going to try it.
It's got like a similar flavor, but not all of them, but a lot of birch beers are like clear. But they taste kind of like root beer.
Okay. Yeah. So there's that. What else do we like? I'm trying to like figure out. We were huge at like just walking downtown Frederick.
Yeah. Anything activities, anything you like to do that's kind of in Frederick.
So because we lived in downtown, every single like time there was something going on, we would go at least to walk by it.
Right. And there's always something going on.
Yeah.
So.
Our favorite stuff was really walking though, because we have a nephew who is 10 years old. So he would come to us, sometimes spend the night, and like we just like usually like go walk around and take him to parks because Mount Airy is not a big town, so when he would come to Frederick he'd be like, oh my gosh, it's such a huge town, so it was kind of fun, and then we would go to get ice cream, stuff like that, but before we had Zoe, her little dog, and do you have pets?
Yeah.
So
you have two small dogs, mini dachshunds.
Yeah, they're like mini children.
Yeah.
They're like children, and not mini children. They're children, because you can have big, dogs that are like children. So you can't really like leave them. You have to take them with you if you go somewhere or arrange someone to, pet sit and stuff like that. So before Zoe, we used to travel a lot, So we would go like for a weekend trip to Philly. We were huge fans of The Office, so we went to Scranton, Pennsylvania, and made a little trip out of it. It was so fun. We love to go to New York City. It's really a fun place. I don't think we would want to live there. It's kind of too loud and dirty for us. Yeah. But in other stuff, it's like really great. Yeah. The art there is amazing. The history of New York City and everything. So
I'm with you on that. Visiting is amazing. I would never want to live there.
But, So we used to love to go to that old movie theater in Frederick, and it's no longer a movie theater. It got closed, but we loved going there. That was really fun. And
is that the one that was on the back of the mall?
Yes. It was kind of. I don't know. Now I think it's like an insurance building. I'm not sure. But So it was. That was really. That's like what we love to do. We love to walk around a lot, and we'd love to go to restaurants and order out and things like that. So that was really great because we lived like in the middle of downtown. We didn't think going to downtown was a big deal because we were living there every day. So one of my favorite things though about living in downtown was I knew so many people because Frederick is not a big town, and especially if downtown is the main place where you meet a lot of business people meet and like professionals meet there. I would just go in the morning with walks with my dog, and I would just be like, oh, hello, how are you? So it was really, really fun. That was a really fun place.
Frederick is so cool because there are some things culturally that might make you think it's a bigger city, like events and things that happen. It's really neat. But it feels like such a small town in that, like, if you hang out at the corner market in Patrick, you're going to see lots of the same people, you know, kind of hanging out, doing their thing. You kind of get this small town kind of feel. Like, it's not hard to get to know a few people, and you bump into those people. So,
yes, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially now when I live in DC and I absolutely know no one there. So
Yeah.
it's like, it's
Yeah.
just kind of, you know, you're like, and you just see a sea of people every morning. It's such a bigger city than Frederick. I will also say, Frederick is just a bunch of dedicated people who, like, the amount of nonprofits and volunteer opportunities that are just like in this town, to me, is unbelievable.
Oh, that's
and I
interesting.
also love the proximity to big towns, while you still can get a decent suburban home
Right.
that's not going to be $1 million or
Yeah.
more, like in DC, and you can get a decent home and have, you know, your kids, you know,
Right.
play in the yard, or like your pets play in the yard and stuff, and then just, you know, an hour down the road there's DC, an hour down the road there's
Right.
Baltimore. That I think Frederick is in a really, really unique
Yeah.
position.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can say, you know, America is definitely better having you part of it and you being a citizen here. So we're really, you know, super happy that you're here, and I'm excited, you know, that you became a citizen, and it'll be fun to kind of see what happens. We'll have to keep up over the years and see where you head, because it seems like, you know, you got a lot of great ideas and a lot of excitement. So thank you. It's really been fun. It's been a great conversation. Thank you for the time, and thank you for just sharing your heart and your insights. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, John. This was amazing, and thank you for doing this. I'm excited to listen to other conversations and learn more from you and your guests.
I hope you enjoyed the show, and I hope it gave you a new insight into the talents, passions, and curiosities from Frederick, Maryland, and beyond. If you did, maybe you can help me out a bit. The best way for the show to grow in its reach is for you, the audience, to subscribe, like, and share this episode with your friends. Much appreciated. Until next time.